After the 1 million demolition compensation hit the account, my mom gave 500,000 to my brother and his wife, worried the remaining 500,000 would end up in my pocket. My sister-in-law aggressively pushed my mom to get a full-body makeover. My 60-year-old mother got double eyelid surgery, a nose job, bone shaving, when she decided to get breast implants. I stopped her and showed her all sorts of cases where accidents happen easily under general anesthesia for augmentation. She was absolutely terrified and ended up canceling the surgery, but after the old man she fancied rejected her confession, my sister-in-law blamed me entirely, saying I was the reason our mother missed out on love in her later years. As I was arguing with my sister-in-law, my mother's heavy body pinned me down, and she seized the chance to inject a massive amount of cheap substandard hyaluronic acid into me. My body became covered in festering sores, and I died. In this second chance at life, my sister-in-law is once again pushing my mom to get plastic surgery for love, all for that 500,000 yuan. Hasn't mom always had a thing for William across the street? Once she gets the surgery and has curves that could outshine ancient beauties, do you really think she won't be able to win him over? Mom has spent decades worrying about everyone else. It's high time she started thinking about herself. On the sofa, my sister-in-law stared at the bank book on the coffee table, her eyes filled with bitter resentment. When the village expropriated our homestead, the compensation came to 1 million yuan. My mother promptly gave half of it, 500,000, to my brother and his wife. She kept the remaining 500,000 for herself. My sister-in-law, worried the money might end up with me, made a scene both openly and behind the scenes. When that didn't work, she convinced my mother to get cosmetic surgery for love, hoping she'd spend every last penny, leaving nothing for me. Ever since my mom moved to the city, she's been completely infatuated with William, our neighbor across the hall. William was a retired university professor, the epitome of refined elegance, a world apart from my mother, who had the rustic demeanor of a country woman. More importantly, William already had a wife. Though his wife was bedridden with partial paralysis, their profound devotion to each other was well known throughout the entire neighborhood. Despite my mother's efforts over 2 years, she couldn't get William to even glance her way, which left her utterly disheartened. My sister-in-law's words were like a shot of adrenaline for my mother's late-life crush. She immediately straightened up, her eyes sparkling. Really, if I get some work done, Professor William will take a liking to me. Men are such visual creatures. With a little sprucing up, Mom, you could rival Bridget Lin and Maggie Chung. You'll have William head over heels, ditching his old hag in no time. My mother's face flushed with excitement as she turned to me. Lily, what do you think? My sister-in-law immediately looked at me with guarded eyes. In my previous life, when I heard my 60-year-old mother wanted plastic surgery for love, of course I objected. It wasn't that I was against her getting some minor tweaks, but her goal for the surgery was to become the other woman and break up a family. How could I possibly support that? But she went ahead and got all the minor procedures done anyway. Double eyelid surgery, a nose job, jawline reduction, you name it. Then my sister-in-law started pushing her to get breast implants. She's 60 years old with all the common age-related health issues like hypertension and high cholesterol. I was terrified she wouldn't survive the surgery and fought against it tooth and nail. In the end, my mother gave up on the plastic surgery, snapped out of her one-sided crush, handed over all the remaining money to my brother and his wife, and they went on living their perfect little life together. Meanwhile, the grass on my grave has grown waist-high. A cough from my mother snapped me out of memories from my past life, suppressing the urge to slap my sister-in-law. I cleared my throat and said with a laugh, if Mom got plastic surgery, William wouldn't be able to resist for sure. In the past, whenever the topic of my mother's intention to break up William's family came up, I'd show clear disapproval on my face. This time, with me supporting her, she actually seemed skeptical. Really, you're not going to scold me? Is there even a need to scold you now? Scolding might work to some extent, but the price paid is just too steep. I've come around. Mom's courage to pursue love is truly moving. I'm just waiting to call William. Dad. That very day, my sister-in-law booked a beauty salon for my mom. Rumor has it the beautician was specially brought in from South Korea, with absolutely remarkable skills. My mom was grinning from ear to ear, praising my sister-in-law for being so capable. Then they turned around and blamed my education for making me useless. saying I wasn't as capable as my sister-in-law who only finished junior high. In my previous life, I didn't see through my sister-in-law's schemes at first, thinking it was common for a 60-year-old woman to get minor cosmetic procedures. I later found out that my sister-in-law's cousin worked as a cashier at that beauty clinic, and she pushed my mother to get surgery just to get a cut of the profits. A double eyelid surgery would only cost $2,000 to $3,000 at a proper hospital. $5,000 at most, but the place my sister-in-law recommended charged $20,000. When I mentioned the price was too high, she immediately retorted sarcastically, "So in your mind, Mom only deserves bargain bin treatment, she's not worthy of the best doctors or premium care." My mother's face hardened. "I knew you had ulterior motives. What good is your master's degree if you've forgotten even basic filial duty?" The next day she paid the $20,000 and came home with a pair of overly thick double eyelids. My sister-in-law walked out of there in tears, pocketing $15,000, and that was just the beginning. A nose job for $50,000, jaw shaving for $70,000, liposuction for $100,000. The $500,000 my mother had set aside for herself ended up mostly in my sister-in-law's pockets. I was already overwhelmed trying to scrape together the down payment for an apartment. I never expected my mother to give me 500,000 yuan as generously as she did for my brother and his wife. If she'd just lent me 100,000, things wouldn't have been so tough. But when my sister-in-law found out, she immediately objected. "What does a woman need with her own place? You'd just be giving your future husband a free asset. Wouldn't that money be better spent taking care of your mother? After all she's done raising you, isn't that the least you could do?" My mother immediately tightened her purse strings and didn't give me a single cent. In the end, I had to borrow 100,000 from someone else to finally buy the house. The house's value shot up twice right after I got it, but sadly I passed away before I could even move in, and my brother and his wife ended up with it. In this life, I'm still going to buy a house, but I'm done counting on my mom for anything. During my lunch break the next day, I made time to go see the house I bought in my previous life. It's a move-in ready apartment with southern exposure, though just a 2-bedroom. Each bedroom opens to a balcony where you can grow flowers and bask in the sun. The thought alone brings me joy. Housing prices haven't started rising yet, and it's significantly cheaper than when I bought it in my previous life. Still, the 30% down payment comes to 380,000 yuan. After working for 5 years, I've only managed to save 280,000 yuan, leaving a full 100,000 yuan short. In my previous life, my graduate advisor found out I urgently needed money and offered to lend me 100,000 yuan. But when she was diagnosed with a serious illness and urgently needed money, my body was already covered in sores and I couldn't even leave the house. I passed away not long after. In this life, I absolutely cannot be a burden to my teacher again. I gave her a call, made some small talk for a while, and gently reminded her to go for a health checkup. My teacher let out an "oh," and said with a laugh, "Thank goodness you reminded me. My son actually bought me a health checkup package a while ago. And it's almost expired. I'll go to the hospital tomorrow." I let out a long sigh before finally hanging up the phone. When I got back to my rented apartment after work, my mom was already lying on the sofa wearing sunglasses. Behind the sunglasses were 2 gauze patches covering her freshly done double eyelids. My rented place is pretty shabby, so she rarely visits. The only reason she came over today is because my sister-in-law couldn't be bothered to take care of her meals. So she made up an excuse about not letting William across the hall see my mom looking disheveled after her surgery. My mom praised my sister-in-law for being so considerate, put on her sunglasses, and took a taxi straight to my place. When she saw me come in, she gestured with her chin toward a grocery bag on the coffee table. "I know you need this," she said. "It's for you." The bag sat there perfectly square, as if it were truly filled with everything I needed most. I knew better than to get my hopes up, yet my heart still gave an involuntary thump. I stepped forward and opened the grocery bag, pulling out a box from inside. When I finally took out the box and lifted the lid, my heart instantly sank to the pit of my stomach. "It's a pair of pillowcases, just a pair of pillowcases," my mother announced. "The spa your sister-in-law recommended is truly wonderful. They even give gifts with purchases. When you spend 20,000, you get either a pair of pillowcases or 2 bars of soap." I remembered you needed pillowcases, so I didn't choose the soap." Her tone was filled with a self-satisfied air of, "See, I'm still thinking of you," as if she were giving me not just pillowcases, but all the riches in the world. I let out a silent, bitter laugh at my own naivety, knowing exactly how she is. I shouldn't have held on to even a sliver of hope. I cooked dinner in silence. She ate the frozen dumplings I prepared, then complained that I hadn't made her a proper meal to celebrate her new beginning. After grumbling for a while, she started happily daydreaming about her future. "Lily, after my double eyelid surgery heals, don't you think William will be absolutely stunned when he sees the new me? I'm not just boasting. Back in my day, I was the belle of our village." My mother went on and on about how popular she was as a young woman, complaining about how clueless my late father had been about romance, and finally declared how perfectly matched she and William were. The full-length mirror across from the sofa reflected her 155 centimeters, 85 kilograms frame like a truth-revealing mirror. Since moving to the city, her sedentary lifestyle and overeating had left her bloated and misshapen, like a formless mass of flesh without a soul. She puts garlic in every single meal, and her breath always carries that distinct garlic odor. She never hesitates to pass gas in public, if she's not embarrassed. Then everyone else is. Though William is in his 60s, he keeps himself in great shape, with his daily bow ties, coffee, and saxophone playing. He just oozes bourgeois charm. Only through my sister-in-law's tall tales and my mom's rose-tinted glasses could she and William be considered a perfect match. That night, my mom was so excited she kept getting up multiple times, making too much noise for me to sleep. I just managed to doze off when her piercing scream jolted me awake. Standing before the mirror, she removed the gauze to reveal eyes swollen to an absurd degree. Still in the early stages of healing, the suture threads on her eyelids were clearly visible, like tiny insect legs. My mother had always had puffy eyes, but they were nothing compared to this. Staring at her reflection, she asked with trembling lips, "Lily, has Mom's face been ruined?" Yes, indeed, in her previous life. Her first cosmetic procedure, double eyelid surgery, hadn't been successful at first. The swelling just wouldn't go down. Later, obvious scar tissue formed on her eyelids, making it clear the surgery had been botched. After a few more touch-up sessions, my sister-in-law suggested my mother wear false eyelashes daily. The lashes would help conceal the swollen ridges, making them less noticeable. My mother tried it and was amazed by the results, praising my sister-in-law for her clever idea. From then on, this 60-year-old woman from the countryside started wearing false eyelashes day and night, while also embarking on her next cosmetic procedure. Compared to the series of mishaps that followed, my mother's current concerns were really making a mountain out of a molehill. She looked at me with panic, waiting for my reassurance. I smiled and said, "I've never had any work done either, so I'm not sure what to expect at first. Why don't you ask my sister-in-law?" She called me useless and immediately dialed the number. It was still dark outside, and it took my sister-in-law a while to answer the phone. My sister-in-law showed no impatience with my mother's concerns. She acted as the top-tier customer service representative for the beauty salon, answering in a sweet voice, "Mom, don't worry. Some swelling at the beginning is completely normal. Once the swelling goes down in 7 days, I'll go with you to get the stitches removed. And then we'll have the beautician do some fine-tuning for you." They can do fine-tuning. Is there an extra charge? Of course they can. With me there, they'll definitely do the fine-tuning for you, and they certainly won't charge for it. My sister-in-law's reply was like a cool drink on a scorching summer day, putting my mom completely at ease, both physically and mentally. After hanging up, she sighed with genuine admiration. "I don't know how this family would manage without your sister-in-law." She collapsed onto the bed and was soon fast asleep, snoring loudly. Thanks to my sister-in-law's smooth talking, Mom kept her composure, even when the stitches came out looking terrible and she had to make frequent trips to the salon for touch-ups. She never broke down again. On the contrary, she'd come back from each session preening, "Your sister-in-law really has pull." The esthetician who studied in Korea did the procedure herself and didn't even mention money in front of me. 3. In her eyes, my sister-in-law is flawless and has nothing but virtues. I just hope she still feels the same way if her face ever gets ruined by plastic surgery. I recently requested a job transfer, moving from a technical role to a sales position, having lived through a rebirth. I've come to realize that you can't rely on anyone. Your greatest ally is yourself. In this lifetime, I'm determined to build my life without taking on a mortgage. I'll create a better future solely with the money I earn myself. Even with my busy schedule, I kept worrying about my mentor's health. After waiting for 2 weeks, I called to check on her medical results. She told me they detected early-stage thyroid cancer. She exclaimed that I was her guardian angel. She said if I hadn't reminded her to get a checkup, she would have definitely put it off until it reached an advanced stage. Although thyroid cancer isn't as deadly these days, treating it in its late stages is absolutely no walk in the park. Now that it was caught early, she's already had the surgery and is recuperating at home. I let out a long sigh, feeling my eyes grow hot, and fought back a sob as I told my mentor, "As long as you're all right, that's all that matters to me." At the end of the month, just like in her previous life, my mother put on false eyelashes again. She gazed at her beautiful eyes in the mirror, utterly pleased with what she saw. Little did she know, there was an unexpected side effect. Her eyes wouldn't fully close when she slept, giving off an eerie, rolling white look that was downright unsettling. Sadly, she had no idea it was happening while she slept. I knew, but I didn't tell her. One weekend, my mom excitedly said to me, "Let's go surprise your William." William was playing the saxophone for his wife on their balcony. The melodious music echoed through the neighborhood, drawing admiration from everyone for the couple's deep bond. My mother pursed her lips and muttered under her breath, "Do you really think playing a tune for a paralyzed person will magically make her jump around? You're a professor, William. How can you be so stubborn?" She turned her head to look at me, her face full of anticipation, and asked, "So, is this okay for meeting him today?" Not only did my mother put on false eyelashes, but my sister-in-law also took her out to get her makeup done. Now she's got everything: concealer, highlighter, eyeliner, and blush. My sister-in-law jumped in before I could and gave her assessment. She's like Dodgy reincarnated, or an imperial consort brought back to life. My mom burst out laughing, clearly delighted by my sister-in-law's remark. One had the nerve to say it. The other had the nerve to believe it. Carrying the 2 pounds of oranges her sister-in-law had bought for her in advance, she gracefully knocked on William's door. The music inside stopped, followed by a voice asking, "Who is it?" My mother, having learned from past experiences, didn't rush to speak. She waited until William opened the door, then handed him the bag of oranges with a beaming smile. "I heard oranges are good for vitamin C, so I brought some for you, William." As she spoke, she deliberately batted her freshly made-up doe eyes, feigning a girlish shyness. William didn't take the oranges, maintaining his intellectual composure as he replied with a faint smile, "Thank you, Margaret, but that won't be necessary. I need to take my wife to the hospital for her physical therapy. I'll see you out." The security door closed swiftly before us, its movement quiet yet resolute. Back at my brother's place, my mother's face fell instantly. After all the changes I've made, how could he not react? Is my double eyelid surgery invisible to him? She let out a loud fart, then sighed in frustration. The stench of gas mixed with the garlic on her breath, instantly fouling the entire room. My sister-in-law was putting on an act. The look of disgust flashed across her face for just a moment before vanishing. My brother was sitting on the couch watching TV and eating fruit when he suddenly covered his nose, ran to the balcony, and yelled in disgust, "Could you at least fart somewhere private, with your crude manners, thinking you can pursue William? Dream on." My mom immediately plopped down on the floor wailing, scolding my brother for being ungrateful. She said she'd spent all the family's money raising him, and this was the attitude he gave her in return. She went on about how my brother didn't appreciate what he had, that her ability to pass gas proved her digestive system was healthy and she was a normal person, unlike that sallow-faced, bedridden wife of William's across the hall, who even needs help to take a shit, let alone fart freely. This only disgusted my brother even more. He retched a couple of times, then simply walked out the door. My sister-in-law helped my mom sit up, wrung out a washcloth to wipe her face, and even thoughtfully reapplied the false eyelashes that had come loose from crying. Then she began gently patting my mom's back over and over. My mom gradually calmed down. Seeing me just standing there, she kicked me in the shin and said, "All you do is stand around watching. You can't do anything right. They say daughters are considerate, but you're not considerate at all. I really regret having you. If only I had a daughter-in-law like her instead." My sister-in-law gave me a smug look and raised an eyebrow. I didn't talk back, feeling only a deep sorrow inside. Over the next 2 months, with my sister-in-law's encouragement, my mother went all in, getting a nose job, lip fillers, jawline reduction, and under-eye bag removal. This round of procedures cost another 250,000 yuan, and a conservative estimate would put at least 200,000 of that straight into my sister-in-law's pocket. After this series of surgeries, my mother's appearance was completely transformed. She used to have a round, full face with a flat nose bridge and thin lips. As she aged, any claim to conventional beauty faded. But her features still held a certain harmony. When she was in good spirits, smiling and cheerful, she had a rather kind and gentle look about her. But now, her chin was so sharp it could probably draw blood. Her nose bridge was high and straight, but lacked any curve, like a rigid bamboo pole. Her nostrils had shrunk to 2 tiny slits, making it look difficult for her to even breathe. Her lips had completely turned into a pair of sausages. After the jawbone reduction, the facial tissue had nowhere to go, causing her entire face to sag with deep wrinkles, like an elderly Shar-Pei. So the hospital performed a facelift and brow lift on my mother, charging 50,000. They made incisions at the hairline and temples, removed excess skin, pulled everything taut, and stitched it up. This was followed by a year of physical therapy to supposedly stimulate collagen production, with no comprehensive plan, just making it up as they went along. The facelift left her features pulled taut and slanted upward, her eyes and mouth corners nearly reaching her temples. I wouldn't recognize her at all if we passed on the street. In our previous life she also had these minor procedures. But since I always voiced objections and followed her to the operating room every time, the cosmetic surgeon didn't dare to go too far. This time I gave her complete freedom, and she ended up turning herself into a complete mess. To be honest, even sharing the same room with her, I still get startled by her appearance unexpectedly. One day when she took out the trash without wearing a mask, the neighbor's toddler was running around playing in the hallway. The moment the child saw my mom, it was so terrified that it let out a piercing scream and wet its pants on the spot. Our next-door neighbor had a huge argument with my mom. They said that with her looking like a ghost, she shouldn't be creeping people out by coming out so late at night. My mom shot back, calling the whole family blind fools with no taste, country bumpkins for generations. When she came back inside, she asked me with a troubled expression, "Do I really look that bad, Mom?" To be honest, at that point, I couldn't even bring myself to offer her any hollow words of comfort. For the first time since my rebirth, I tried to talk her out of it. "Mom, just stop. You might not look great now, but at least it's not affecting your health." Since I didn't say what she wanted to hear, she flew into a rage, grabbed a broom, and was about to hit me just like when I was a kid. This time I didn't dodge, but shouted, "If you strain yourself and displace the implant, you'll have to go through the pain of getting it fixed again." My mother halted mid-step. Unwilling to jeopardize her 100,000 yuan investment, she dropped the broom, slumped to the floor, and started wailing. The room filled with the pungent garlic scent from her breath, like a drowning fish gasping for air. I felt suffocated. Grabbing my jacket, I fled the scene. The night was vivid outside, neon lights flickering, bustling yet lonely, standing in the cold wind. I realized my mother's dislike for me wasn't just about favoring sons over daughters. It was also because I took after my father's temperament, taciturn and inarticulate. After my father left for long-term migrant work, she always took her frustrations out on me. Even when she hit me the hardest, I still loved her. I believe she suffered the most by marrying my father, and that as a vulnerable woman, she had a hard time in this world. I was determined to rescue her from her suffering. I'd been trying all these years. I was constantly doing farm work until junior high school. Even in high school, I worked part-time at a hot pot restaurant every weekend. I scored exceptionally well on the college entrance exam, and only after giving her the tens of thousands in scholarship money from the school did she finally agree to let me attend university. During university, I juggled my studies with 3 part-time jobs. Every month when I got paid, I'd only keep 500 yuan for my living expenses and send the rest to her. 3. That money ended up being used by my mom for the down payment when my brother started clamoring to buy a house right after graduating from vocational college. Later on, I also took on the responsibility of covering his monthly mortgage payments. I always told myself that if I endured a little more hardship, my mom's life would be a little easier. Being young, I can handle a bit of hardship. Yet all this effort brings no reward. I deserve neither a mother's love nor the family's wealth. I took out my phone and looked at my savings record. It's been nearly 6 months since my mother started getting plastic surgery, and about the same length of time since I switched to sales. With my previous savings, I've now accumulated $500,000, which is more than enough for a down payment on a local property. But I've had a change of heart. Not long ago, I applied for a transfer within the company to work on overseas markets. I'd go even to a war-torn country if it meant getting away. I'm going to disappear completely from this family. I won't let any of them find me. When I got back to my rental, my sister-in-law had shown up again. She was buttering up my mom, praising her new look like it was the most fabulous thing ever. Wow, what a stunning transformation. So chic, it's making me feel insecure. She opened the Douyin app and recorded a video of my mom. With the heavy filter effects, my mom was transformed into an exotic-looking mixed-race beauty, radiating charm and allure. As soon as the video was posted, the number of likes skyrocketed. The comments were flooded with compliments and requests to date her, and some creepy guys even slid into her DMs trying to hit on her. Netizens have a keen eye for the truth. Mom, don't you dare doubt yourself, own it with confidence. Flattered and floating on cloud 9, Mom stopped putting herself down and declared with gusto, "Shall we go see William soon?" "Absolutely. After all the effort you've put in, Mom, he'll be blown away and deeply moved." I was utterly amazed by her next-level service. She's truly dedicated to her craft of deception. Another weekend found us standing outside William's house once again. My mother knocked on William's door again, waiting with visible anxiety. William had been away for the past few months visiting his son with his wife, so he hadn't had the chance to see my mother's new transformation. My parents-in-law just got back the other day, and my sister-in-law immediately spilled the beans to my mom. That's what set today's plan in motion. She's not actually trying to help my mom out. It's just that in this situation, William's attitude toward my mom has become part of her money-making scheme. The more William brushes off my mom, the more it gets under her skin, and the more determined she becomes to change things. All my sister-in-law has to do is flap her gums, and the cash just comes pouring into her pocket. I didn't really want to come in the first place, but my mom probably thought I didn't have faith in her, so she insisted I witness her conquest of William with my own eyes. Footsteps quickly approached from the other side of the door. When it opened, a young man stood there, bearing a striking resemblance to William, about 70% similar, clearly William's son. He asked suspiciously, "Who are you looking for?" My mom quickly introduced herself. "My surname is Zhang," from across the hall. Before he could finish, Daniel's face lit up with sudden realization. "So it's you, the ugly homewrecker trying to be my dad's mistress." His words were laced with several vulgar terms. My mom was momentarily at a loss for which one to address first, but finally retorted, "I'm not ugly. I just had plastic surgery. I look good now." Daniel snapped at her. "Even if my mom were paralyzed, a country bumpkin like you wouldn't stand a chance. Show some self-respect. Don't make me spell it out. Keep pestering my dad, and I won't hesitate to slap you silly." My mom started to fire back, but a loud fart escaped her, instantly cutting off her own words. Daniel immediately covered his nose and mouth, yelling, "What the hell are you, a damn skunk?" The door slammed shut right in front of us. My mom was completely stunned, tears streaming down her face. Back in the village, she'd often get into heated arguments with people, but since moving to the city, she'd never been treated like this. For even when I accidentally scared the kid in the hallway last time, the parent didn't curse at me this viciously, especially not from a young guy. My sister-in-law looked genuinely concerned as she helped my mom into my brother's place. I really didn't want to waste any more time on this nonsense, so I made up an excuse about working overtime and left early. I had just stepped out of the residential complex when someone called out to me from behind. I turned around and saw that it was Daniel, Uncle William's son. He looked a bit embarrassed. After walking up to me, he scratched the back of his head before saying, "Thank you for messaging my dad last night so I could come over and help him out. I'm really sorry about the harsh words I said earlier last night." After learning that my mom was coming first thing in the morning, I did send William a message. He's an economics professor. I once reached out to him for help with some concepts I couldn't grasp, which is how we ended up connecting, even in this new life. While I verbally encouraged my mom to pursue love, I still didn't want William to keep getting harassed by her. I chuckled. Your words were harsh, but when dealing with my mom, you've got to pull out the big guns. His expression finally softened with relief. He asked me again, do you really think my outburst just now will put an end to this for good? I found the answer to that question when I got home that evening. My mom decided to get breast augmentation surgery for William's sake. Once again, the wheel of time has brought us to this moment. In my previous life, having seen through my sister-in-law's scheme, I went all out to stop my mom when I learned she wanted a breast augmentation. I made a scene and showed her countless pictures of botched surgeries. It took nearly a month of relentless effort before she finally abandoned the idea. Should I go through all that again in this life? On the couch, my sister-in-law was animatedly describing men's obsession with those 2 handfuls of flesh with the vividness of a porn scene. She'd stoop to any load just to keep draining my mother dry. She kept firing questions at my mom, one after another. Want to make a change? Want to become an ageless enchantress? Want William to be so captivated he forgets to go home? My mother answered with a heart-wrenching intensity, as if thoroughly brainwashed by a cult. I want to change. I want to be an ageless enchantress. I want William to see only me, and never that invalid in his family again. Reality, in this way, eerily echoed Daniel's unspoken worries from this morning, even though William's family opposed my mother with such hostility. She was still determined to be the moth flying into the flame. My sister-in-law was very pleased with my mother's reaction. Then, turning to me, she set her sights on me. Lily, why don't you chip in for mom's breast augmentation? My mother immediately laid down the law. I don't have enough money for the surgery. You need to cover the difference. 200,000. I nearly laughed out loud. I don't drink milk. Why would I sponsor that? For, my mom snapped without thinking, you might not need it. But your William does. Only after speaking did she feel a hint of embarrassment, her face flushing briefly before she launched into her guilt-tripping routine. I raised you all these years. What's wrong with spending 200,000 of your money? Back in ancient times, every penny a woman earned before marriage belonged to her parents. Hand over the money now if you know what's good for you, unless you want a beating. While my mother was saying this, my sister-in-law stood by watching with an amused smile. I clenched my jaw so hard I nearly went over and slapped her across the face. If it weren't for her, my mother wouldn't have gone this far off the deep end. If it weren't for her, I'd still be alive in my previous life. I let out a cold laugh and said, enunciating each word, Cindy, you can fool my mother all you want, but don't you dare set your sights on me, push me too far, and I'll call the police. My sister-in-law shot to her feet. Fool her about what? You're making a baseless accusation. She charged straight at me, trying to hit me. I let her have her way in my past life, but I won't tolerate her arrogance in this one. As she reached for my hair, I seized her long locks first, yanking them backward. While she cried out in pain, I drove my knee hard into her stomach. She hit the ground with a thud, clutching her stomach and howling in agony. I had just brushed the dust off my hands when my mom charged at me with a broom, swinging it wildly. You ungrateful brat, how dare you defy me? I'll teach you a lesson today. I grabbed the broom and held on tight. No matter how hard she pulled, she couldn't wrench it free. As she yanked with all her strength, I suddenly let go. She stumbled backward and landed hard on the floor. The rented room was once again filled with her hysterical sobbing and wailing. I leisurely unlocked my phone and showed her my bank balance. See, I've got money. But you won't get a single cent from me from now on. Want a boob job? Didn't you just give your precious son $500,000? Go ask him for it. I moved out of the rental that very night and crashed at the office for the evening. The next day, I found a short-term rental and pressed the HR department about when headquarters would approve my transfer request to the overseas market. The HR manager and I joined the company around the same time, and we've always been on good terms over the years. She looked slightly surprised and said with a laugh, but you're the most family-oriented person I know. What made you consider going abroad? I gave a wry smile. Everyone comes to their senses eventually, even if it takes them a while. I used to be the most home-loving person, but now I find myself wanting to escape it more than anything. The manager checked the progress of my application, then called headquarters for clarification. After getting the details, He told me, the Southeast Asia market you applied for has already been filled. We still have an opening in the South African market. Are you interested? I'll take it, I replied almost without hesitation. The manager nodded. Though conditions in South Africa are challenging, the Belt and Road Initiative has been progressing rapidly in recent years, creating vast market opportunities. 10 years from now, I'll probably be calling you a wealthy woman. I breathed a sigh of relief, quickly resubmitted my application, and received confirmation from headquarters within just 2 hours. After that, it's just a matter of working with the company on passport procedures and such. I'll be leaving in about a month at most. My brother called me several times that day, but I didn't answer any of his calls. At 3 p.m., he barged into the company with my mother in tow. Lily, after all the years I've spent raising you and providing for you, this is the thanks I get, getting beaten by my own daughter. Did your graduate studies teach you how to assault the elderly? His booming voice cut through the office, and with one shout, every head turned in his direction. My mother plopped down on the floor as usual, wailing and carrying on about her miserable fate, how she'd scrimped and saved since my childhood to put me through grad school, only for me to turn my back on her now and not spare a single penny. She yelled, "Boss," at the top of her lungs, threatening that if such an unethical employee stayed with the company, she'd take her protest to the city government's doorstep and demand justice from the authorities. All the while she was lodging her complaint, she kept shooting me sidelong glances, waiting for me to cave in for the sake of my career and reputation, expecting me to pay her off with 200,000 yuan to get what she wanted. It's a shame I'm no longer the person I was in my past life. If they want to ruin me, I'll take them on. The company executives first had someone calm them down, then brought me into the conference room. You need to resolve this immediately, whether it's true or false. It will damage the company's reputation. If it escalates to the point where the company has to step in, forget about your transfer to the South African market. You'll likely be fired. I walked out of the conference room, stood right in the middle of the crowd, looked at my brother and my mother, and shouted, "Do you know what my mother asked me for money for? She wants a boob job. She's getting breast implants to seduce a married man. She's in her 60s and wants bigger breasts." The entire office erupted in an uproar, buzzing with whispers and murmurs. "That's not true, she's lying." My mother panicked, immediately jumping to her own defense. I yanked the mask right off her face, exposing her features for everyone to see: botched double eyelids, a thick nose bridge that ran straight up her forehead, lips swollen like bee stings, a chin sharp enough to puncture something, and facial features all pulled taut and upward from an overly aggressive facelift. That face is just too convincing. And my brother just received a 500,000 yuan compensation payout from the family 6 months ago. To avoid paying this money himself, he brought my mom here to cause a scene. That's the real reason they showed up today. 5. As I spoke, my voice caught in my throat, tears streaming down my cheeks without stopping. No one wants to air their dirty laundry in public. Who would want others criticizing their own family, especially the mother who gave them life and raised them? But if I don't tear down all the hypocrisy with my own hands and break free from the cage of family ties, I could travel to the ends of the earth and still never escape this mental imprisonment. All my colleagues stood by me. "You don't need to explain. We're not fools who'd believe such nonsense. What kind of mother and brother would try to ruin their daughter's future just because things don't go their way? Security, get them out of here." Amid my brother and mother's furious shouting, security finally escorted them out of the office building. For the next week, my brother still waited for me downstairs, but with my colleagues covering for me, I managed to avoid him every time. I thought my mom would give up when she realized the cost, but soon after, I saw a photo on her social media of her in surgical scrubs with the caption, "Heading into the operating room soon." They say it's major surgery requiring general anesthesia. Feeling a bit nervous. When someone asked what procedure she was having, she just replied with a smiling face with smiling eyes emoji. My work became overwhelmingly busy before my departure, and I stopped paying attention to my mom's updates. Besides handing over my local responsibilities, I also attended a 2-week training program at the corporate headquarters. By the time I got back, I had less than a week left before my flight to South Africa. My colleagues told me that my mom had come looking for me several times over the past few days. She wasn't throwing tantrums like she used to. In fact, she was surprisingly pleasant, but with a mother who favors sons over daughters, sudden kindness toward her daughter never bodes well. That's why none of them bothered to tell me. It brought a lump to my throat. A friend once told me I grew up emotionally deprived, with an impoverished heart. Even casual pleasantries from others feel like genuine kindness to me, making me so grateful I immediately want to repay them. She warned me not to be so emotionally vulnerable, or I'd easily get taken advantage of. Her words were truly enlightening, and I've been working on overcoming that very issue all these years, but seeing how much my colleagues cared about me really touched me deeply. That evening after work, I ended up running into my mom right outside our office building, wearing a mask and hunched over. She offered me a boiled corn as a peace offering. I remember you loved this when you were little. I didn't pick up. I never liked corn in the first place. As a child, I ate it often because she would count every grain of rice when cooking, preparing meals only for herself and my brother. The leftover broth wasn't enough to fill me up, so I had no choice but to gnaw on corn. She took the corn back and started complaining to me. The surgeon your sister-in-law recommended this time was incompetent. After the procedure, the incision kept oozing pus. I've been taking anti-inflammatory meds by the handful, but nothing's working. There's no way I can face Professor William looking like this. I need to get this fixed first. As she straightened her posture slightly, I finally got a clear view. 2 prominent mounds bulged from her upper body, like 2 large bowls inverted on her chest. She used to be quite heavy, and I'd wondered if after the breast augmentation she'd start demanding liposuction too. But now the coat hung loosely on her, looking almost empty, as if there was nothing inside but 2 hollow bowls. Why don't you go see my sister-in-law? Wasn't she always so attentive? Oh, she found a job and works until midnight every day. I don't want to bother her all the time. It's hard enough for young people to find work these days. The turmoil in my heart instantly vanished when I heard how considerate she was being toward my sister-in-law. Was my sister-in-law's job the only one that came with struggles? Did she think mine was any easier? When she and my brother tried to ruin my future a month ago, did they ever stop to consider my difficulties? I didn't want to exchange another word with her. I turned to leave immediately. I took 2 steps forward, then turned back, thinking I was going to show concern for her. She quickly put on an ingratiating smile and waited for me to speak. I smiled at her and said, "In just 1 week. I'll be flying abroad and never coming back. I wish you, my brother, and his wife all the happiness and good health." Her eyes widened in shock, and half of her poorly secured false eyelashes suddenly fell off. I continued, "Do you know why your cosmetic procedures keep having complications? You thought you paid $500,000, but in reality, at most $100,000 was spent on the procedures. The other $400,000 ended up in my sister-in-law's pocket. With only $100,000 covering all those procedures, what kind of qualified surgeon do you think she could hire? What quality materials do you expect her to use?" My mother staggered slightly and retorted sharply, "Impossible. She's a devoted child. She would never do such an unethical thing. Just because you see me doting on her, you're jealous and trying to drive a wedge between us. I knew she would react like this. It's no use." I turned away expressionless and strode forward with purpose. 12 Epilogue. After moving abroad, I threw myself completely into my work, progressing from facing repeated client rejections to gradually securing second and third collaborations with them. While emotions in this world may deceive, hard work never will. In just 6 months, my commissions have already added up to over $1 million RMB. And in our line of work, that's actually considered lower middle tier, as my client base continues to grow. I'll be earning even more. 6. I still keep in touch with my former colleagues, classmates, and old teachers back home, occasionally sending them some local specialties to try. An old colleague sent me a video link one day, urging me to watch it immediately. In the video, I saw my mother and my sister-in-law. They were brawling in the middle of the street, looking utterly disheveled. My mother wailed, "You swindled my money and reduced me to this state." My chest feels like it's being crushed by 2 heavy stones. The pain keeps me up every night. I'd be better off dead. My sister-in-law shook off my mother's hand and snapped back, "You shameless old woman trying to seduce men. I'm just doing a good deed." Then another video came through. In the same setting, my mother was sitting on the curb with disheveled hair, screaming my name through sobs. The ones fighting each other had become my brother and his wife. My brother grabbed my sister-in-law by the hair and yelled, "You swindled 400. from my mom but told me it was only 100, then secretly funneled 300, to your brother for his house. You're a two-faced traitor, and I'm going to beat you to death today. Blood streamed down my sister-in-law's face, but she didn't back down. You're no better than me. Almost 40 and still useless. You drove your own sister away and can't even pay the mortgage, you pathetic loser. The brawl finally ended when the police showed up. A co-worker asked, "Isn't that your mom and brother?" I wasn't sure at first, but then I saw your mom's face. It's definitely her. You rarely see an elderly person with such distinctive features. It really is my mother. She's grown even thinner and more haggard than before. Those two enormous bowls pressed down on her like bloated leeches, draining her dry. As the video played on repeat, I found my face streaked with tears before I even realized it. I asked my former colleague to take my mother to the plastic surgery department of a proper hospital and have all the fillers in her body completely removed. In the end, my colleague sent me a front-facing photo of my mother. After all those varied yet crudely performed procedures, she could never go back to how she was before, and still looked frightening, but at the very least, let her stay healthy. A colleague told me my mother was crying and asking where I was. She said she'd finally seen my sister-in-law's true colors and had already made the decision for my brother to get a divorce. She said my brother couldn't be relied on either. He'd been in an accident while delivering food months ago, and now he's lame in one leg, with no income and just sitting at home draining their resources. They had to sell the house and rent a place instead. She said she no longer has any intention of breaking up other families and hopes I'll give her a chance to live with me again. Her remorse probably holds some sense of guilt toward me, but more than anything, it's just dissatisfaction with her current situation. The last thing I could do was ask a colleague to give her 1,000 yuan each month for living expenses, after going through so much in 2 lifetimes. Repaying the debt of giving birth to me up to this point should just about clear it. I once heard a revered monk say that even between mother and daughter, bound by blood, there must still be a destined connection. When fate is thin, don't force it. Only then can you be at ease. I've finally let go of my obsession with family bonds completely. That spring festival, William sent me a photo. In the photo, his wife was leaning against the sofa with a crutch, able to stand again after years of William's meticulous care and rehabilitation support. She wore a traditional Chinese dress with subtle makeup. Though years of bed rest had softened her figure, her gaze toward William remained tender and affectionate. In this world, enduring warmth and tenderness still exist. The end. Story 2. Under the abnormal temperature, there is a power outage in the city, frequent mountain fires, the drying up of the river water, and the death of outdoor workers. Later, this disaster became relevant to everyone. Mankind was plunged into an unprecedented high temperature, but this was just the beginning of the end. 01. On the way back to the dormitory after the temporary suspension of classes, I was so annoyed by the heat. A group of people were crowded at the entrance of the girls' dormitory, and they sent another student with heatstroke to the ambulance. This scene has occurred frequently recently, and I have already become numb to it. This high temperature has lasted for more than half a month. And not a single drop of rain has fallen during this period. There are frequent mountain fires in the surrounding areas, and there is a power outage due to the high temperature. The temperature during the day even reaches 48 degrees. At 12 o'clock at night, the temperature remains as high as 40 degrees. Under the continuous high temperature, many outdoor workers and the elderly also died of heatstroke due to insufficient treatment. The famous scenic spot in the city where my school is located has even exposed the riverbed. I heard that a certain lake has also dried up and become a grassland, which conforms to the changes described by the ancient words, the vicissitudes of life. In order to cooperate with the city's power rationing policy, halfway through the afternoon class, the teacher informed us that there would be a power outage soon and asked us to return to the dormitory to avoid the heat. Each dormitory was also given a box of Huaxiangzhengqi water. And we were told to pay attention to the prevention of heatstroke. At this critical moment, being able to get so much Huaxiangzhengqi water shows that the school has really put in a lot of effort. It's a pity that although the school has a backup generator, it is not enough to support the large campus, and the dormitory still lost power. The dormitory without air conditioning is like a sauna room in a northern bathhouse. We were so hot that we were sweating profusely, so we all went downstairs. Seizing the opportunity, and chose to sit in the shaded area of the flower bed downstairs, but it didn't relieve the heat at all. Fortunately, the small supermarket in the dormitory area has its own backup power generation equipment, barely keeping the freezer running. My roommate Vivian carried the cold water and ice cream that she had desperately grabbed and distributed them to us one by one. We were so touched that we almost wanted to call Mom to her, drinking the cold water. I took out my phone and took a look. It was 2:12 p.m. now, right in the hottest period of the day, and the real-time temperature was 40 degree. Looking at the distorted heat waves in front of me that were almost tangible due to the heat, I felt a strange feeling in my heart, so I asked my roommates, the weather forecast says it's 40 degree now, but why do I feel that today's temperature is hotter than the 48 degree the day before yesterday? What about you? I think so too. It's definitely more than 40 degree. Is there a mistake in the report? Wait, let me check the app on my phone, Emma said as she took out her phone and took a look. Then she said in surprise, it's really 40 degree. Is this for real? It's so hot. Because of the heat, the two of us reached a consensus and started complaining about this terrible weather off and on. Just as we were talking happily, Sophia, who had been listening to us for a long time, interrupted us with a somewhat serious expression. Valerie, Emma, Vivian, look, she handed over her phone, on which there were a bunch of conversations in a mixture of English and Chinese. We didn't understand what it was about and all looked at her in confusion. Sophia leaned forward, motioning for us to come closer, and then lowered her voice and said, "This was sent to me by my brother. This is the research of their laboratory recently. It says that the solar flare is erupting violently and it will get hotter and hotter soon. He asked me to make some preparations in case of power and water outages caused by the high temperature." "Is that true?" Emma asked suspiciously. This made Sophia's face look a bit unhappy. "If you don't believe it, it's okay. To be honest, I didn't really believe it either. After all, we can hear such remarks several times a year. But this time, I had an indescribable strange feeling in my heart. The recent weather was indeed extremely hot, and Sophia's brother is indeed quite capable. She admires her brother, who has won numerous awards, very much and doesn't want to hear anyone say anything bad about him. So Vivian and I immediately smiled and tried to smooth things over for them. Emma also realized her mistake and apologized to her, saying that she was just speaking quickly and didn't mean not to believe her brother. Sophia's expression softened, and she continued, "My brother has also reported it, but no one believes it. But I always feel a kind of uneasiness that I can't explain." "Me too. I have a kind of indescribable sense of unease," I echoed her words. Then I asked my roommates, "I think it's better to believe it than not. It won't do any harm to make some preparations. What do you think?" They thought for a moment, and finally we all decided that it would be better to make some necessary preparations. At this time, we also joked with each other, thinking that if we made preparations and nothing happened in the end, would we laugh at ourselves when we looked back. But when we turned around, we found that Sophia was still sitting on the flower bed, with her head lowered and not moving at all. I was a bit puzzled and asked her, "By the way, Sophia, did your brother say when it would probably start getting hotter?" But Sophia, who was asked the question, stood up silently while looking at her phone, with a look of panic on her face. This made the sense of unease in my heart instantly magnified. I saw her hold up her phone screen towards me. The real-time temperature on the screen had changed from the previous 40 degree to 43 degree, and in the blink of an eye, it became 45 degree. The temperature seemed to be rising rapidly at an unpredictable speed. At this moment, Sophia's trembling lips' answer also drifted into my ears along with the heat waves dash. "Right now, 02. After a deathly silence, the four of us looked at each other and immediately rushed straight to the school supermarket. On the way, I called my boyfriend Owen, asked his dormitory to also make preparations for emergencies, and asked him to bring me one of the solar panels he bought for fun before when he came. Due to the epidemic prevention and control, the management of entry and exit of our school is extremely strict. There's no way to even think about supermarkets outside the school or takeout. The only option is the small supermarket in the school. But recently, with the high heat not subsiding, the school seems to have calculated it. It is extremely sensitive to the control of the water source in the supermarket, except for the scattered bottles sold in the freezer. For the remaining water, if you buy a large quantity, you must register your student ID card, and each person is limited to buying no more than 2 items. Each item is a package of 12 bottles. Which means that each of us can only take 24 bottles plus a few scattered bottles in the freezer. Fortunately, there is no limit to the purchase of food. We mainly bought dried meat, vacuum-packed food and other foods that are not easy to spoil under high temperature. We also bought some basic daily necessities, small fans that can be used with both USB and batteries, mobile power supplies. As well as buckets and basins. The school supermarket is really too small, and the variety of goods it sells is also very limited. We checked one by one for a long time, but couldn't find anything else that could be useful. When we got back to the dormitory, we filled all the buckets and basins with water and placed them. There was almost no place to step in the dormitory. Looking at the dormitory that was stuffed full by us, I wiped the sweat that kept pouring out of my body. At this time, Sophia, who came back after filling the last basin of water, announced that the water supply in the water room had been cut off. I exhaled a puff of hot air, took out my phone and took a look. In just over an hour, the temperature had already reached 47 degrees. Although it also reached 47 degrees a few days ago, it wasn't as hot as today. I suddenly had an illusion that the real-time temperature forecast had already been out of balance. 03, through the window of the dormitory. We could see that the air outside was distorted and deformed. Under the shade of the small flower bed downstairs, the only advantage was also lost. People rushed back to the dormitory one after another. The shouts of, "I'm dying of heat," were endless. I installed the solar panel that Owen gave me just now in the direct sunlight outside the balcony. This was a souvenir we brought back when we visited the Science and Technology Museum during the holiday. Although it couldn't power large items like air conditioners, it was no problem to charge the phone or drive a fan. While the sunlight was strong, we charged the purchased power banks and various electronic devices that we might need. Then we used the small fan powered by batteries, tied a water bottle with several holes on it to the fan, and sat around it to cool down by the wind. The water was all fetched from the water room before the water supply was cut off. We collected a lot of empty bottles from several neighboring dormitories, filled each of them with water and prepared to store them for later use. The temperature was getting higher and higher, and all the people outside had dispersed, leaving only the people who kept moving water from the supermarket back and forth. By 4:30 p.m., the temperature had already reached 49 degrees. Every time we took a breath, we had an illusion of suffocation. When we finally managed to recover from the heat and were lying on the ground, when we were about to check our phones, we found that we had already lost the network signal. People in the corridor also shouted intermittently, "Does anyone's phone have a signal? I don't have it, neither do I. What's going on?" Everyone was making a fuss, and the school broadcast, which had lost power, didn't sound either. For a moment, the disputes in the whole building were in chaos. Until a loud bang-dash sound disrupted the commotion and made the whole building quiet, because almost everyone was lying on the balcony and saw where the sound came from. It was an asphalt ground. The surface layer of asphalt had melted and wriggled everywhere. The sound just now was the loud noise when the ground cracked underneath. The ground had been melted and cracked by the heat. But this wasn't the reason why the commotion completely disappeared after the ground cracked. The high-voltage cable not far away also made a sound like static electricity exploding, accompanied by visible sparks. We had never seen such a scene before. Panic instantly shrouded the entire campus. 04. After a few seconds of silence, the dormitory building was noisy again and in chaos. Some people started running out of the dormitory in a panic, heading towards the school gate. What should we do? Should we run too? The few of us fell into deep thought. Where could we run to, just now? Pushed by the panicked crowd, someone fell to the ground. The girl let out a cry of pain. When she was helped up, the exposed skin that touched the ground was shockingly red, as if it was scalded. At this time, I don't know if the school finally used the generator to power the broadcasting room. The campus broadcast that had been silent for a long time finally made a sound. "Hello, hello," screech, screech dash, "Hello, all students. Please don't run around. All students, please don't run around. Please return to the dormitory immediately. Please return to the dormitory immediately. Please listen to the unified command. All students, do not stay outside. We have arranged for teachers to guide the evacuation. Please cooperate in an orderly manner." Broadcast notice. broadcast notice. Then it was repeated several times, and finally the panicked crowd was stopped. Our hearts were also temporarily at ease. The people outside also started to return to the dormitory building one after another. Soon after, the sound of the teacher using a loudspeaker to coordinate the evacuation uniformly sounded downstairs. All students, please follow the arrangements, keep up with your counselors. We are going to evacuate to the nearby subway station evacuation and resettlement point immediately. Everyone, don't push, don't be in a mess, and follow the unified arrangements. We also went downstairs. But as soon as the people became dense, the heat doubled directly. Fear lingered in our hearts. Now we could only follow the instructions and quickly evacuate to the resettlement point according to the school's arrangements. The subway station where we were resettled was just over 1 kilometer away from the school gate, but this section of the road became the most difficult road I had ever walked in my short 20-odd years of life. This was also the first time I saw the orange halo in the sky. Like the eternal afterglow that never sets, it was extremely beautiful, but also made people extremely uneasy. 05. Our school is located in a university town away from the urban area. Looking into the distance, among the few scattered buildings, many were emitting thick smoke and had already caught fire. When we arrived at the subway station, it wasn't as good as we had expected, because the subway station also lost power. Not only us, but also the students and residents of the nearby schools were evacuated here. I guess there are no other bomb shelters nearby. Instantly filled with a large number of people, the temperature inside the subway station also continued to rise, and it couldn't relieve the intense heat brought from the outside at all. The only consolation was probably that our phones finally had a little signal. People around started calling their parents. Those who were lucky enough to get through the call cried until they couldn't speak. Those who couldn't get through the call were anxious and held up their phones to look for a signal everywhere. I was one of the unlucky ones, but I comforted myself that fortunately my parents were in the north and there should be no problem. 06. We sat cross-legged in groups of 3 or 2, tacitly waiting for the night to fall. We all silently hoped in our hearts that after the sun disappeared, the torture of this high temperature and heat would be much better. We used our phones, which had an intermittent signal, to browse the news respectively and report our safety to our families and friends. There were constant discussions in the crowd. Is this the end of the world? I heard that many regions in many countries have abnormal high temperatures, and a lot of people have died. It seems that the volcano in the neighboring country has erupted. I also saw that, just now. I also saw that in the neighboring country, due to the fire. It burned near the nuclear power plant, and it almost blew up the nuclear power plant. I read in the news that there were earthquakes in some places. At first, everyone was discussing these topics related to meteorological disasters or whether it was really the end of the world. Later, as more and more people entered the subway station, the temperature continued to rise, and it became hotter and hotter, until a crying scream, "Teacher, teacher, come and take a look," my roommate fainted. Someone fainted from heatstroke, and the school authorities rushed to deal with it immediately. Later, "Teacher, I'm not feeling well either. Teacher, here, please take a look at my roommate. Is he suffering from heatstroke? Teacher, advisor." More and more people started to faint. Some were even seriously suffering from high fever and convulsions. The school authorities simply couldn't handle it all. But after all the emergency calls were made, the rescue didn't arrive for a long time. This city has been in chaos. 07. My roommates and I were sitting in the corner, already so exhausted from the heat that we were on the verge of collapse. As soon as the sweat came out, it was quickly evaporated. The water we brought had already been finished a long time ago. Emma's phone even crashed directly due to the excessively high temperature. Just now, I heard someone who brought a portable thermometer say that the temperature here had reached 50 degrees. I remember reading relevant research that said the human body can last for 1 hour in an environment of 71 degrees. It can last for 49 minutes at 82 degrees. It can last for 33 minutes at 93 degrees, and it can last for 26 minutes at 104 degrees. These are the temperatures at which the human body can still breathe when exposed to them. However, the prerequisite is that there is water replenishment and sufficient oxygen. Once these conditions are lacking and the body temperature exceeds 42 degrees, the function of the central nervous system will be severely disordered, and there will be a life-threatening danger. If we just sit here and wait for death like this, something will happen to all of us. 08. I thought this couldn't go on like this, so I told my roommates my thoughts, and also got in touch with my boyfriend and his roommates. Finally, after a unanimous decision, we prepared to leave the subway station and go back to the dormitory to save ourselves, but when we found our counselor, we were stopped. "What's wrong with you kids? Stop causing trouble, I'm almost exhausted." "Counselor, I'm sorry to trouble you, but we have a reason to go back to the dormitory. If there are any consequences, we will take responsibility ourselves." Of course, the counselor didn't agree. It was her responsibility to take care of our safety, but in such a special period, it's naturally not the same as usual. There was no other way. So we had to try being polite first and then resort to force if necessary, because there were too many people. The school authorities simply couldn't keep an eye on everyone. While the counselor wasn't paying attention, we directly sneaked out. When we got out of the subway station, it was already dark outside, but the setting of the sun didn't take away the residual heat brought by this high-temperature disaster. On the steaming streets, the air was distorted and suffocating, in a trance. It reminded me of the apocalyptic games I had played before. For a moment, I didn't know whether I was really experiencing this intense heat or playing a game in my dream, but I hoped this was just a game, and when I opened my eyes again, everything could return to peace. 09. We helped each other and walked towards the dormitory building on campus. The campus, which is always bustling with activity, was completely silent. When we went upstairs, we found that some people hadn't left with the large group just now. Instead, they were hiding in the dormitory and using the stored water to dissipate the heat. When those people saw us, they immediately closed the dormitory door vigilantly. We didn't look any further but quickly walked towards our own dormitory. The dormitory building, which had lost a large number of people, was much better than the stuffy subway station just now. After entering the room, we immediately turned on the fan that had already been reconnected to the power supply. Although the wind blowing out was hot, it was better than nothing. During the refuge just now, Vivian showed some serious symptoms of dehydration. We poured the Huaxiangzhengqi water that was distributed during the afternoon class into her. Then, using the large water bucket we bought from the supermarket, according to her body shape, we took out a part of the water and put her in it. During the time we were away from the dormitory, a lot of the water we stored had evaporated. The water in some small basins had even been reduced to half, but the overall amount of water stored was still enough for the four of us. When Vivian touched the water, she let out a comfortable sigh and said that her dehydration symptoms had been relieved a lot with the replenishment of water. Seeing that this method was effective, the three of us immediately followed suit. Each of us forced ourselves to drink a bottle of Huaxiangzhengqi water, and then got into the water bucket. The moment I touched the water, I felt as if my life had been sublimated. It was just like the feeling of taking a hot bath together. 10. As soon as the number of people decreased, the mobile phone signal in the campus, which had been cut off due to congestion, improved a lot. We huddled in the buckets and called our respective families. I'm from the north and I applied to a university in the south. After the call was connected, my parents said they were safe and the temperature in the north was normal. It's just that after they saw the news, they couldn't get in touch with me, and the two of them were extremely worried. My mother said that she wanted to come and find me at that time, but all the airplanes, high-speed railways, trains, etc., to our city had been shut down. My mother cried sadly, "Valerie, why don't you stop studying this course? See if you can buy a ticket tomorrow and come home first. Mom is so worried. Mom doesn't expect you to become outstanding, I just want you to be healthy." I had been holding on for a whole day, but the moment I heard my mother's voice, I couldn't hold back my tears anymore, and I also cried out injuredly. After drying my tears, through my mother, I learned a lot of news that hadn't been circulated yet due to the signal problem. It turned out that it wasn't that no one was taking care of those students with heatstroke. The whole city was in a state of chaos. I originally wanted to talk to my parents more, but the signal started to get worse again, so I quickly told my mother a few words. "If I can buy a ticket tomorrow, I'll go home immediately." My mother then felt a little more at ease and hung up the phone. After making our respective calls, the four of us soaked in the buckets and chatted. Under the extreme fear and exhaustion, I didn't know when I fell asleep. When I woke up again, it was just dawning outside, and everything seemed peaceful. I got out of the water bucket, still sweating profusely from the heat. I originally thought that the air would be cooler in the early morning, but as soon as I opened the window, that fierce heat wave rushed towards me again. I immediately obediently got back into the bucket. I opened my phone and took a look. There were actually some messages in the class group, but the content inside made me shocked. In just one night, countless people collapsed in the subway station. The ambulance came several times, but it simply couldn't take all of them. Later, the medical staff directly set up camp in the subway station, but they were also made of flesh and blood, and they also fell one by one. In the photo, people of all kinds were lying on the ground, although no one mentioned it. The classmates who had fallen silent beside them were silently pronounced dead. 11. My mood was extremely heavy. Now the whole city not only has no water supply, no electricity, and lacks water sources, all resources also can't be delivered due to the obstruction of the high temperature. The only good news is probably that it's 5 a.m. now, and the temperature has dropped from yesterday's 50-degree to 45-degree, but the next second, my boyfriend Owen's call came. And even this only bit of joy was dispelled. Valerie, we probably have to leave. Leave? Where to? I frowned in confusion and lowered my voice. The nerves of my roommates, which had been tense all the time, were inevitably awakened by my voice, and they looked at me blankly. Seeing that they were awake, I turned on the speaker of my phone. Owen's voice then rang out in the dormitory. I received the news that City C is going to be under lockdown today. Lockdown? Why? I don't know. But we have to leave quickly. Currently, all passenger transportation methods have come to a standstill, and the power has been paralyzed. If we don't leave now, I'm afraid we won't be able to leave. Then, where are we going? Emma beside me was scared to tears. Owen was silent for a while. Okay, Valerie, you guys pack your things. I'll try to get 2 cars. We'll go north. The weather in the north is normal now, and we'll head north. I pursed my lips and thought for a while, and finally replied to him, okay, let's go in the direction of my home. We'll pack our things first and wait for your news. Our conversation was very quick, filled with an unprecedented sense of tension and urgency. I looked up out of the window. The sun, which had once protected us for thousands of years, was so dazzling at this moment that my heart became more and more uneasy. I don't know whether our decision is right or wrong, but my intuition tells me that we must leave. And the sooner the better. 12. Without the restrictions on entry and exit, it was much more convenient to move around on campus. One of Owen's roommates is a rich second generation, and it was very convenient for him to get a car. This virtually saved us a lot of time. We divided into 2 groups, 2 men and 2 women in each group, and got into the 2 cars respectively. We divided all the existing water sources and food equally between the 2 cars, because of the heat and the urgency. We completed this process within half an hour. The car had already been filled with gas. After getting in the car and enjoying the long-lost air conditioning, the heat wave that had persisted for several days finally receded from our bodies. Owen drove our car and headed towards the highway according to the navigation. I originally thought that since our school was built in the suburbs, it should be very close to the highway entrance. But the reality made me realize how lucky we were to be staying in the corner of the school. There were flames towering into the sky everywhere in the city, in the fire with smoke filling the sky. It was like a living hell. The vehicles that had collided on the road, the crowds of people who were running in a hurry to take refuge, the fire department, the police, the medical staff, the army, and the masses were all working together. Everyone was busy protecting this city. Because of the fallen trees and roadblocks that had been burned, we had to change our route many times before driving towards the direction of the highway entrance. But here, there were already countless vehicles lined up, and it seemed that their thoughts coincided with ours. Waiting was the most tormenting. We waited in line for nearly 3 hours for a road that was only 2 kilometers long. It was already 10 a.m., and the temperature started to rise again, although there was air conditioning in the car. The places exposed to the sun were itchy and stinging, so I took out a coat and put it on the car window to block the sunlight. 13. There were still 5 cars in front of us, and it would soon be our turn. Seeing the hope and also to liven up the atmosphere, I asked, Owen, I have a question. Owen in the driver's seat turned his head and replied softly to me, what's wrong? This isn't an epidemic situation. Why is the city going to be under lockdown? My boyfriend, who always appears very knowledgeable in front of me, was silent for a moment and rarely replied to me. I don't know either. We stared at each other. At this time, Vivian, who had been playing with her phone beside me, suddenly shouted, I know, quick, tell us." I immediately became interested. As a result, Vivian just replied to me, "It's because someone spread a rumor." I was stunned on the spot. She immediately stuffed the phone into my hand, pointed to the news headline on it, and asked me to look. Silas was taken away by the police for spreading the rumor that City C would be under lockdown. Goodness, it really was a rumor. We were all a bit stunned. Then what should we do now? I pointed to the toll station that we were about to pass in front and then to the long line of cars behind. Our current situation was a bit like being in a dilemma, because I couldn't make up my mind. I was going to ask the opinions of the others in the other car. They were lined up right behind us. At that moment, my mind went blank and I forgot about the phone. I opened the car door and was about to get out and go over to ask, but thanks to this thoughtless and instinctive action of mine, otherwise, we would all have been doomed here. 14. The moment the car door opened, I instantly felt as if I had entered an incinerator. The heat outside was even more terrifying than the temperature last night, but the real-time temperature displayed on the phone was 48 degrees. Even if my sense of temperature was inaccurate due to the air conditioning, it shouldn't be this extreme. I immediately retracted my foot, closed the car door, and turned my head with a look of panic. The expressions of the three people in the car also changed simultaneously. They felt it too. What's going on? I couldn't figure out why it suddenly became so hot. Just as I was thinking wildly, I caught a glimpse of the corner outside out of the corner of my eye. Instantly, my mind raced. Something's wrong. We have to hurry up and get through. Valerie, what's going on? I immediately explained in a hurry. With so many cars here, all of them are running the air conditioning. No wonder the temperature is so high. We have to quickly notify everyone to disperse. Look at that car from the neighboring country next to us. The rear windshield is starting to crack. With so many cars together, if one car explodes, everyone will be finished. And look over there. I pointed to the passage for large vehicles beside us, where there was a large tanker truck marked with symbols of flammable and explosive materials. If something happened to this car, it was simply unimaginable. I'll get out of the car and communicate with them. Valerie, you quickly get in touch with our other car. As soon as the words were spoken, Owen immediately got out of the car and ran towards the toll station. I also immediately took out my phone, called Emma and the others, and repeated what I had just said. 3 minutes later, Owen came back with an ugly expression. We hurriedly asked him, "How is it?" Owen always has a good temper, but this time the words he said carried some anger. "They told me, a student, not to meddle in other people's business and not to spread rumors." Then what should we do? Call the fire department and remind them. Let's go through first. Okay. The atmosphere was a bit gloomy for a moment. However, what made it even more depressing was that the fire department's phone couldn't be connected. 15. Time suddenly seemed to pass very slowly, like every second was a year. But clearly, there were only a few cars ahead, yet there was still no sign of moving at all. The navigation showed that the congestion at the highway entrance had extended all the way into the urban area. We sat in the car, waiting anxiously, and kept observing the situation of the nearby vehicles. The owner of the car whose rear windshield had started to crack seemed to have discovered the problem. He got out of the car despite the heat and checked around. He cursed helplessly twice and then got back into the car. The long line of the entire motorcade also started to become impatient. Some people started honking their horns and shouting curses while opening the windows. What are they doing in front? Can we go or not? They're so slow, they can't even catch up with going to hell. These people are so slow in handling things. One person's resentment was like the first torch that was lit, and the torches all around were lit up one after another, and everyone started to quarrel. Some people even got out of the car and went to the toll gate to argue. I don't know what they said. Maybe it was because of the extremely hot weather that made people lose control of their tempers. The two groups of people actually started fighting. This was really bad. We sat in the car, extremely anxious. The continuous honking of the horns behind us was like the accompaniment of a death knell. Time passed bit by bit. The situation remained deadlocked, but the temperature rose mercilessly. 2 minutes passed, and it was 47 degrees. 5 minutes passed, and it was 48 degrees. 7 minutes. 49 degrees, 8 minutes, 50 degrees. It was still rising. I felt that the car window began to make a faint cracking sound. 10 minutes, 53 degrees, 12 minutes, 54°, bang, screech, the sound of sudden braking. The next second, flames shot up behind us. The flames were so intense that I instinctively covered my eyes with my hand. Unexpectedly, a car not far behind us caught fire spontaneously due to the heat. In a moment of shock, I only heard Owen's low shout, "Hold on tight." The next second, he sharply turned the steering wheel. He stepped on the gas pedal. I was caught off guard and was directly thrown onto Vivian beside me. Screech, screech, bang. There were the sounds of car brakes and collisions everywhere. Owen quickly changed lanes. Fortunately, the car in front of us also reacted quickly. It crashed into a car further ahead and broke through the barrier, giving Owen the opportunity to squeeze into the narrow passage and rush out with it. Owen stepped on the gas pedal hard to accelerate. I was helped up by Vivian. Looking back, the toll station that was originally in a silent queue was like water gushing out when a sluice gate was opened. All the cars were scrambling to rush out. It was a race against death. No one wanted to give way. The tongues of fire behind us shot up into the sky. The flames chased the cars in front and ignited them in succession, and they exploded directly under the push of the extreme high temperature. If anyone was even a little slower, they would end up like a burning ship that was burned to ashes together. Owen drove the car at high speed in the first row. The cars behind accelerated and collided without distinction. Bang, the tires and parts flew out. The car body flew out of the fence and fell to the bottom of the mountain. They scattered, collided successively, and rear-ended each other in a chain reaction, not giving the survivors any chance to catch their breath. They instantly caught fire under the high temperature. 16. The veins on Owen's hand holding the steering wheel bulged with force. He looked ahead with concentration and didn't dare to reduce the speed at all, because we all knew in our hearts that there was something even more dangerous behind us. That oil tanker. I still remember that one year, an oil tanker on the G15 highway exploded and destroyed an entire village around it. Owen pulled the speed of the car to the limit, and the whole car body began to feel unsteady under the distorted hot air. The cars fleeing behind also followed closely at high speed. I kept dialing the rescue number with trembling hands. I didn't know whether there was no signal here at all or the signal was lost due to the extremely high speed of the car. The call simply couldn't get through. I tightened the seat belt on my body and held Vivian's hand tightly. I closed my eyes nervously. 1 minute, 93 seconds, 128 seconds, 135 seconds, boom. A deafening explosion sounded. There was a harsh buzzing sound. It was as if my eardrums were being pierced. The world lost its sound. It was blank out. The car body was violently shaken by the shock wave. Everyone leaned backward due to inertia, and Owen almost lost control of the steering wheel and crashed into the fence. I turned around in horror, and saw a scene that I will never forget for the rest of my life. A mushroom cloud rose into the sky from the direction of the toll station. There were billowing thick smoke and fierce flames. The flames shot up into the sky, dozens of meters high. The sounds of explosions in the distance were still coming continuously. I could almost imagine the scene of those cars crowded together exploding one after another. 17. Owen reduced the speed a bit. We were safe, finally. Everyone let out a sigh of relief, as if it was a common understanding. The cars that had raced against death with us on the highway all silently slowed down and stopped by the emergency lane. Owen opened the door, gave me a hand to get out of the car, and we walked towards the back of the car together. The people in our other car also got out and walked over. We stood by the roadside and silently looked in the direction we had come from. The flames all over the sky burned into the urban area along with the traffic flow that had originally been queued up to the urban area. In just a few minutes, half of the sky in City C was burned red. People also got out of the white car that had been the first to break through the barrier and rushed out of the toll station with us just now. It was a family of 3. The child was about 5 or 6 years old, sweating profusely from the heat, in a milky voice. He asked his parents with red eyes in confusion, "Mom and Dad, where are we going? Why don't we go home? I'm so hot." The child's mother held him tightly in her arms with tears in her eyes, kissed his forehead, and coaxed him in a low voice. Sorrow spread among our group of survivors. We all looked in the direction of the school without any prior agreement. In this city engulfed in flames, there were also our classmates, friends, teachers. But in the face of such a natural disaster, we were so small and powerless. We could only hope that they would be safe and that there would be a day when we could meet again. 18. I looked at the sky in City C that was burning brightly and magnificently, and I felt that the temperature was getting hotter. I checked the temperature, and as expected, it was still rising. City C, surrounded by the fire, was like adding a basin of water to a charcoal fire basin, fueling the fire and making it burn even more fiercely. Therefore, the temperature rose even more rapidly in a short period of time. It had been less than a minute since we got out of the car, and we couldn't stand the heat anymore, so we started to get back into the car. Before leaving, I took one last look at City C, but when I retracted my gaze, I froze in place. I turned around in horror again and looked in the direction that I had caught a glimpse of out of the corner of my eye just now. City C is a mountain city surrounded by mountains on all sides. I don't know when the fire burned from the city to the mountainside, but in the mountains, even a tiny spark can start a prairie fire, and this section of the highway we were on was built along the mountain. The mountain fire was approaching us at an unapproachable speed. The most terrifying thing was that due to the excessive high temperature, cracks were faintly appearing on the melted ground, and the wet soil buried deep underneath was welling up, as if it was about to split open from the middle. The next second, I took 2 steps back in horror, my lips trembling up and down. As I ran towards the car, I shouted at the top of my voice, "Quick, quick, get in the car quickly, run!" Everyone got in the car in a daze and urgency at my heart-rending shout. Owen heard my shout and started the car the moment everyone got in, and drove at the same speed as when we were running for our lives just now. At first, the other vehicles followed us without knowing the reason. Later, when they saw the land behind them constantly heaving and cracking, and the endless flames burning in the mountains like the breath of a giant dragon that were lingering behind us, they all sped along the road at high speed. Screech, screech, in the speeding car. I didn't know what that sound was. Screech, screech, bang, bang, the glass by the window exploded. I quickly pulled Vivian beside me to protect our heads and crouched down. Without the glass, the hot air driven by the high speed blew on us. I don't know if anyone else has felt the feeling of the hot air cutting their faces like we did. I think the ancient punishment of branding on the body with a hot iron couldn't be much worse than this. 19. We were running for our lives, unable to distinguish time or space. We could only trust Owen, who was holding the steering wheel. Under the turbid waves of the high temperature, he was feeling worse than us. We could lower our heads to block some of the wind, but he had to see the road conditions clearly and pay close attention to the environment around us that could change at any time. I felt very heartache, but I didn't dare to make a sound to disturb him, for fear that my emotional words and deeds would cause him any trouble. Finally, when I felt that the last bit of moisture in my body was about to be evaporated by the scorching air, we drove out of the mountainous area of the highway and crossed the border between City C and City B. Looking at the situation behind us where there was no sign of the flames following and the cracked road surface not spreading anymore, Owen finally reduced the speed of the car. After stepping on the brake and stopping the car steadily, he leaned against the backrest of the seat. His eyes were tightly closed, and his brows were furrowed in discomfort. I quickly unfastened my seatbelt and stumbled towards the back of the car, holding back the tears that were about to fall. Together with Vivian and Owen's roommate Reed, we took out the water we had stored from the trunk and fed it into his mouth, and also poured it on his body. Then I fanned the wind for him with a hard paper that I casually found in the car and could be used as a fan, looking at him with red eyes. After a while, he seemed to feel much better and struggled to open his eyes, probably seeing that I looked too embarrassed. He wearily raised his hand and touched my head, comforting me softly. "Don't cry, I'm okay." I didn't say anything. I placed his hand properly and stubbornly fanned the wind for him. 20. At 4:21 p.m., after everyone had finished resting, Reed took Owen's place, and we set off on the road again, without the car windows. We tied the plastic bags and clothes in the car to both sides to temporarily replace the car windows. Now, the air conditioning in the car couldn't be used anymore. We weren't stingy with the water source and Huxiangzhengqi water. We drank when we needed to and used them when necessary. The purpose was to prevent anyone from getting dehydrated or showing symptoms of heatstroke, and to avoid the situation where there was no time for treatment. We first ensured that everyone was in a safe state and then considered the issue of the water source. Otherwise, if we saved the water source but something happened to the people, What was the use of keeping it? Fortunately, there were no more thrilling dangers on the remaining journey. Away from City C, the temperature also dropped to 49 degrees. However, due to the high temperature escape just now, many people's phones crashed. Only my phone and Emma's phone in the neighboring car could barely function. Although there was a signal, the phone line couldn't be dialed out at all. We could only use the occasional 4G signal we caught to send one or two messages. We drove until a little after 6 p.m. and entered the service area. It was crowded with people who had fled from various places around to take refuge. Everyone was extremely tired. The gas station had long been unattended, but fortunately, there was still some fuel left in storage. We imitated the actions and appearances of some people and also filled up the car with gas. After talking with the people, we finally got several important pieces of information. First, led by City C, all the surrounding cities had experienced that high-temperature riot. There were large fires in the whole city, and in some places, the ground also cracked, forming countless abysses. Second, except for driving, all other means of transportation had come to a standstill. The railway tracks of trains and high-speed railways were so hot that they deformed, and derailments had occurred, causing countless casualties. Planes were directly suspended. Third, currently, many sections of the highway were damaged and blocked. Only the direction towards City A was passable, and the damage situation in City A was relatively light at present, and it had been used as a safe refuge point. 21. After discussing based on the information, we finally decided to head towards City A. At 7:32 p.m., we set off on the way to City A. Fortunately, the rest of the journey was safe and smooth. We just passed by many vehicles with faults along the way. There were cars with flat tires, cars that had crashed, and cars whose glass had exploded like ours. There were all kinds of ways of damage. They all stretched out their hands by the roadside to stop the passing cars and asked for a ride. But on the road of fleeing for their lives, every car was filled with people, and no one stopped for them, although the temperature was extremely high. I leaned against the backrest after running for my life all day and somehow fell asleep. During this short period of sleeping, I didn't sleep soundly. In my dream, I kept repeating the scene of the flames shooting up into the sky. When I was awakened by the argument, cold sweat was still constantly breaking out on my forehead. What's going on? I got up in a daze and looked at Owen and the others who were whispering about something. Owen patted me reassuringly. It's okay, go back to sleep. I struggled to sit up and was in a daze for a long time, until I moved my neck, which had become stiff from sleeping, and suddenly found that the temperature seemed to drop. I actually felt a trace of cool wind with moisture. I quickly turned around and pulled open the car window made of clothes on one side. Fine raindrops fell on my face. It was raining. I couldn't believe it. It was really raining. I tugged at Owen's sleeve. Owen, look, it's raining. It's raining. I was extremely excited. Owen seemed to be infected by my joy and replied with a smile, yes, it's raining. I held the rainwater in my hand for a while, and then I remembered, what were you discussing just now? We were talking about that we need to speed up and get to City A. Why? I was a bit scared and uneasy after being frightened and tossed around by this day, and I asked. Then Owen took my phone and took a screenshot of a weather forecast that had been refreshed when there was a signal recently. It clearly said that there would be hail accompanied by thunderstorms and strong winds at night, and it might cause hail disasters. I looked at our car with gaps all around, then at the words on the phone. I looked at the words on the phone again, and then at the distance to City A shown on the car navigation. My heart sank to the bottom. 22. The journey continued. The rain was gradually getting heavier, seriously affecting the speed of our journey. 4 kilometers away from the exit of the highway to City A, our struggling car finally broke down, and the car that Emma and the others were in had already stalled 50 kilometers ago. The 4 girls in our dormitory squeezed into the back seat. The remaining 2 boys were taken in the car by the big brother of the family of 3, so we all got out of the car and walked on the highway in the rain. The 2 boys who were in the car pulled by the big brother took the initiative to get out of the car and gave their seats to Sophia and Vivian, who were so uncomfortable that they were almost unconscious. Emma and I held hands and walked behind the boys. They blocked most of the wind and rain for us in front. In the midst of the wind and rain, people walked extremely slowly. We walked with difficulty, not knowing how much distance we had covered. A thunderclap in the distance split the night sky into daylight. This thunderclap was like an announcement. The next second, hail the size of rice grains fell on us. All of us looked at each other and immediately supported each other and started running with our last bit of strength. The rain was getting heavier and the hail was getting bigger. It hurt when it hit our bodies. Later, the hail that fell on the ground seemed to be developing towards the size of a baby's fist. We couldn't move forward anymore. Owen pulled me into his arms, protected me with his body, and covered his head with his hand. I protected Emma, and the others tacitly protected each other. Emma had been hit so painfully that she started crying. I also inevitably shed physiological tears. I tightly held Owen's hand in return, looking at the endless dark highway. My heart was desolate and sad. Although we usually seemed fearless, we were all just in our early 20s. We hadn't stepped into society yet or seen the great rivers and mountains of our motherland. Were we really going to die in the wilderness? 23. Just when I thought we were going to die here, a beam of light pierced through the darkness in front of us, accompanied by the flashing of blue and red lights. It slowly drove towards us, stopped steadily and pulled over, and our collapsing emotions instantly found salvation. My legs went weak, and I, along with Emma whom I was supporting, fell to the ground together. Even Owen couldn't hold us back. It turned out that after Vivian, Sophia, and the others got off the highway, they immediately found someone to rescue us. The traffic police uncle sent us to the unified resettlement point in City A. After our group got together, we gave each other a big hug and then wept with joy, with unified resettlement and arrangements. Our tense spirits for a long time finally relaxed, although City A was still in a state of water and power outage. The resettlement points for the refugees who came to seek shelter all had power generation facilities, which could meet our basic daily needs. This place was actually the makeshift hospital built during the epidemic. It had survived the high-temperature turmoil in the previous 2 days, and was used as a resettlement point. The arrival of this rain finally put out the fire of the high temperature. The mobile phone also had a signal as expected. They all used the only remaining phones of mine and Emma's to report their safety to their families. I also soothed my parents who were crying uncontrollably and said that I would definitely go home as soon as the traffic was restored. 24. After arriving in City A, this apocalyptic disaster seemed to be finally coming to an end. We also kept an eye on the news of City C online all the time. The temperature in City C had also dropped. But due to the high-temperature turmoil and the explosion at the highway toll station, the whole city was still like a beggar struggling through hardships, gradually recovering its lost vitality bit by bit. Although the surrounding cities were all facing difficulties themselves, they still dispatched supplies and offered help to City C to the best of their abilities. It was the unity of all people after the disaster. We also tried our best to follow the volunteers in the resettlement point to help restore people's livelihoods. During this period, we also tried to contact the school and the counselor, but it seemed that the whole school had lost contact. Our lives had all undergone unexpected changes because of this sudden high temperature. Although this disaster was not like those disaster movies where millions or even tens of millions of humans were wiped out at every turn, but for reality, this was the most real appearance of the end of the world. The sorrow of those family members and the cries for help of those who were seeking rescue were all indelible pains in people's hearts. 25. On the 5th day in City A, the continuous heavy rain broke the tranquility of this city. Since the first rain, the temperature in City A dropped from the initial 40° to 35°. Then it dropped from 35° to 30° in a short period of time, and finally plummeted to 20°. This rain continued for 2 days, and the water level of the surrounding rivers rose sharply overnight. City A directly issued a disaster warning for mountain floods and mudslides, and urgently transferred more than 10,000 people overnight. We also followed and were transferred to a safer place. But looking at the rain curtain outside the window that was so heavy that it was impossible to see clearly, that sense of unease welled up again. The high temperature at that time had risen so suddenly. But unexpectedly, what awaited us was not the cold, it was an earthquake. When I was awakened by the earthquake in the middle of the night, I was in a panic and was dragged by Owen and ran out with the crowd, accompanied by screams. We quickly fled and ran out in the heavy rain. The speed at which the whole building collapsed was unimaginably fast. Just as I had run more than 10 meters out, the broken stones splashed by my footsteps hit my foot, and I was directly knocked to my knees. Fortunately, Owen was quick-eyed and quick-handed and pulled me up, otherwise, would have been buried in the ruins together with that building. I stood in the heavy rain with lingering fear, looking blankly at everything around me, the running crowd, the helpless cries, the wailing in the sky. Mom, wife, where are you? Help, save me. Is there anyone who can help me? Please, help me, my son is trapped underneath. Everything was so illusory yet so real, everything was so painful yet so helpless. But time didn't give us any room for thinking. We quickly joined the rescue team, trying to help everyone, but later, no one could help them anymore, because everyone was unable to save themselves. This disaster still fell on us survivors in another way. 26. Aftershocks were still occurring continuously. The temperature had dropped to 10 degrees within an hour. Those who had run out wearing only a single piece of clothing for refuge could no longer hold on. This was not the most serious part. Because of the endless rain that kept falling, the water had already risen to my thighs. Even though we had made preparations in advance, City A still suffered from floods. We followed the crowd and tried hard to find higher ground, but because the aftershocks were still occurring continuously, no one could guarantee the safety of the buildings that hadn't collapsed. But the water level didn't give us time to consider. It rose to my chest in a short period of time. The water temperature in the low-temperature environment was so cold that I couldn't stop shivering. I suddenly even felt an inappropriate nostalgia for the high temperature a few days ago. Later, since the four of us girls were not very tall and there was really no other way, with the help of several boys, we were carried into the nearest tall building that hadn't collapsed. I sat on the stairs of the third floor and tremblingly took out my mobile phone. But it had already gotten wet and couldn't be turned on. Only Emma's remaining mobile phone gave us a glimmer of hope, but this hope was also shattered by the icon indicating no signal. We silently watched the water level outside keep rising, and then silently went up one more floor. The wet clothes stuck to my body, and my hands turned purple from the cold. I shivered and took out the thermometer I had bought a few days ago. The temperature at this time was already 4 degrees. Owen took off his clothes and gave them to me, but I took them and put them back on him. At this time, don't care who is whose girlfriend or who is a man and who is a woman. If any one of us catches a cold, our current situation can't solve it. Hearing this, Owen pursed his lips and replied, okay, and put the clothes back on. Then he insistently took my hand to warm me up. At 9:34 p.m., we were sitting on the 4th floor, and the water level downstairs had flooded the 1st floor. At 10:43 p.m. At 0 degrees, the flood rushed into the 2nd floor. At 1:12 a.m., at -5 degrees, we took refuge on the 5th floor. At 2:07 a.m., there was no more then. The surging water waves washed away the foundation of the next building, and rushed towards us with huge waves raised by the collapse in a huge crashing sound. It was impossible to tell whether this was an aftershock or the final death knell rung by the flood waves for us. At the moment when the flood rushed over, Owen held me and fell into the water. Dong, who, all the memories flashed before my eyes like a skim the surface. Dong, hua, in the last second before I lost consciousness, I was lifted out of the water by Owen. Valerie, hold on, cough, cough. I coughed my lungs out, and my throat ached. In a dazed state, I instinctively grabbed the thing that Owen pushed towards me. It was a broken piece of wood. The desire to survive made me hold the driftwood tightly. And Owen held me under the water with one hand to prevent me from being washed away by the water, while holding the wood with the other hand and floating with me along the flow of the water. Fortunately, both of us were light in weight, and this piece of wood had enough buoyancy. Otherwise, we would have really died in the water just now. But I smiled bitterly. I'm afraid this could only extend our survival time a little bit. We had fled all the way. But finally we still couldn't escape this bad luck. The water at -5 degrees was bone-chillingly cold, and there were even some ice shards. Owen and I were pushed by the water waves like this, shivering until our lips turned black. The sky gradually brightened, and under the baptism of the rain curtain, it had a strange and breathtaking beauty, which made my original fear of death fade a lot. I looked at Owen, who was holding me and constantly breathing hot air to warm me up, and softly called him. Owen. He raised his head and looked at me, still gently asking me, what's wrong? I smiled at him and said it was nothing. Then, after thinking about it, I leaned over to kiss him while maintaining my balance. Owen, I think we won't be able to go back this time, but still, thank you, and, I'm sorry, I originally wanted to take you to meet my parents, but it seems I have to break my promise now." Hearing this, Owen lowered his head and chuckled, and raised his hand to touch my head as usual. But this time, his palm was no longer warm and dry, but it was wet and cold from being washed by the water, but it still made my heart flutter just like the first time I saw him. He also smiled at me and said, "It's okay, you can make it up to me in the next life." We looked at each other for a while and smiled silently, then our two heads leaned against each other, snuggling up to each other and floating on the water whose destination was unknown. As the sky grew cooler and the rain gradually stopped, we floated past the trees that hadn't collapsed, and it generously gave us a green leaf. We also floated past people who were also trying to survive, but he had already lost his breath. Floating, floating, I also closed my eyes wearily. I don't know if it was the extinguishing of the lamp before a person's death or an illusion of the hope in my heart. The color of camouflage actually appeared in my last field of vision. It was 2:12 p.m. now. Right in the hottest period of the day, and the real-time temperature was 40 degrees. The end was very much like the magnificent orange sunset that was burned by the fire under the high temperature that day. I held tightly the hand of Owen, who had already closed his eyes, and with my last bit of strength, I curved my lips into a smile. In the face of those determined eyes that were welcoming us, I finally closed my eyes with relief. 27. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a temporary hospital resettlement point. Next to me was Owen, whose hands were tightly holding mine. This disaster had claimed the lives of countless people, that number none of us wanted to see again or mention. Later, Owen and I put down our wishes for them in front of that whole wall of photos and then quietly left the hospital. After that, in the city full of ruins, the traffic was the first to be restored. I followed the large group and was sent back home, where I saw my parents, who hugged me and cried until they almost fainted. After soothing my parents, Owen and I went back to participate in the reconstruction of the disaster area together. Not long after, I received the school's notice of resuming classes as promised and returned to campus again. But among the 4 people who used to laugh and play in the dormitory, only Vivian and I were left now. Everything seemed to have settled down, but had this disaster really ended? I can only say that it hasn't. Maybe just as countless scholars have said, human beings' excessive destruction of the environment has finally made us caught in our own trap. This is the Earth's punishment for us and also a way for it to save itself. After we had attended classes safely for several months, in the north during the winter vacation, in the north that had remained unscathed in that disaster, a real severe winter arrived, an apocalyptic severe winter. As long as the trend of the harsh environment is not perfectly solved one day, the end of the world will coexist with humanity. Story 2. After divorcing my husband, he schemed to leave me with nothing but an old house in the countryside to live in. Meanwhile, he moved into a luxurious apartment in the heart of the city with his lover. In my previous life, infuriated, I hired an expensive lawyer to reclaim the house. Unexpectedly, a zombie apocalypse broke out, and the densely populated city center was quickly overrun. I died in the wave of zombies. However, my husband and his lover survived by hiding in the countryside. This time around, I simply packed my bags and left. What is this rundown country house? It's a sanctuary during the apocalypse. Considering our years together and the saying, a couple for a day, affection for 100, I'll generously give you the cowshed in the countryside. I advise you not to be ungrateful," Samuel said condescendingly, tossing the divorce papers at my feet. I froze for a moment, the strong smell of blood still lingering in my nose, instinctively covering my head in a defensive gesture. "Don't play the victim here. I never laid a hand on you," he shouted defiantly, as Ryan, our lawyer, watched. The pain of the document hitting my foot and his loud accusations snapped me back to reality. I had been reborn. Reborn on the very day the divorce papers were signed. Tears uncontrollably streamed down my cheeks as I touched my unharmed legs. Seeing my tears, my ex-husband paused, then with a hint of pity and a softer tone, said, "I know you still love me. After all, a man as outstanding as me is hard to find. It's natural for you to be upset." Josephine, standing nearby, wasn't pleased. She chuckled, her hands protectively over her belly, her eyes slyly fixating on my ex-husband. Cutting off his speech, stirred by her gesture, he quickly professed his loyalty. "It's Josephine I love, not you. Go find someone simple in the countryside and move on." I rubbed my arms to dispel the goosebumps, suppressing my disgust. "If you regret it, just say so directly instead of beating around the bush. It seems like you're the one who doesn't want this divorce." Regaining my composure, I bent down, picked up the papers, and with a slap, placed them on the table, signing my name decisively. Josephine, unwilling to be outdone, hugged my ex-husband tightly. Twisting his waist sharply, he yelped in pain, "Let's sign now. Whoever backs out is a coward." Lowering my eyelids, my expression unreadable, I couldn't help but recall the foolishness of my previous life. Back then, I had slapped my ex-husband hard, furiously accusing him of delusionally trying to swindle the house from me, saying he'd only get it over my dead body. He was taken aback by my ferocity and we parted on bad terms. I then hired a professional lawyer at a high cost and retrieved the house, satisfying my desire for revenge. But on the very day I reclaimed the house, the zombies emerged. The populous high-rise in the city center, where no one had the habit of stockpiling food, was among the first areas to fall into chaos. I held out at home for 3 days, thirsty and hungry, eventually forced to venture out for food. I encountered a surging tide of zombies and was torn apart. Meanwhile, my ex-husband and his mistress enjoyed an idyllic life in the old country house, self-sufficient until a vaccine for the zombie virus was developed. They became part of the first group of inhabitants in the new world, reaping all the benefits. Watching the loving couple, I secretly vowed to outsmart him this time, leaving him no quarter. I stuffed the divorce papers into my bag, grabbed my luggage, and hurried non-stop to the old family home in the countryside. On the way, I called my best friend Lila. The vivid image of her tragic death, while bringing food to me in my last life, dying right outside my apartment, still haunted me. 1 second, 2 seconds, the ringing of the phone pounded against my heart. I clenched my teeth unconsciously until the call connected and Lila's languid voice came through. "Miss Joe, what can I do for you?" Hearing her voice, I sighed deeply. The pent-up frustration in my chest since my rebirth finally dissipated. Unable to control myself any longer, with a choked voice, I said, "I got divorced." A cup slid off the table, making a crisp clattering sound. It took a while before my friend responded, her voice thunderous with anger. "Did Samuel, that scumbag, do something to hurt you? Wait for me, I'm coming over with scissors. I'll castrate him." Her words made me burst into laughter. Then I sobered up and said, "I'm on my way back to my hometown. I have something very important to tell you." In just a few words, I explained to her about my rebirth and asked her to come with me to the old family house in the countryside for refuge. Lila, always carefree and imaginative, readily accepted the reality of my rebirth. After a pause, she burst out, "So, in my last life, did I die looking beautiful?" I was silent for a long moment, recalling the image of Lila being overwhelmed by zombies while trying to save me. My eyes involuntarily moistened. I said deliberately, "In this life, you will not die." Sensing my mood, Lila tactfully changed the subject. She then started discussing the feasibility of using zombies to farm the land around our old countryside house. Amidst laughter, I brought the conversation back and agreed with my friend that I would go ahead and reinforce the old house, turning it into a post-apocalyptic shelter. She would stay in the city for now, preparing to stockpile supplies. After ending the call, I immediately began the work of rebuilding the old house. I contacted a renovation company from the neighboring town, asking them to send personnel to take measurements right away. The windows needed to be explosion-proof, the doors burglary-proof, and the old house's walls needed to be heightened and reinforced, with a high-voltage electric fence installed not just against zombies but also against neighbors. Since people's intentions can be the most unpredictable in an apocalypse, the yard needed a dry toilet installed, the existing well cleaned and fitted with pipes leading into a bomb shelter behind the old house. I also contacted a manufacturer to install photovoltaic solar panels, planning to cover the roof with solar charging panels so that even in a power outage, our daily needs could be met, and the high-voltage circuit in the yard could provide continuous protection. 2 hours later, both I and the renovation team arrived at the rural old house. It was a secluded, dilapidated barn, far from any town, backed by a small hill and surrounded by overgrown weeds, rarely visited by anyone. The main house had only 3 rooms, with a large gate and courtyard to accommodate cattle. After clearly stating my requirements and tripling their pay as an incentive, the construction team started work that afternoon. The foreman jokingly asked, "Young lady, you're making your old country house so luxurious, it's not like the apocalypse is coming, is it?" A chill ran down my spine, and alarm bells rang in my head. I was so focused on reinforcing the house that I forgot that the human heart is more terrifying than the apocalypse itself. After realizing this, I broke down in tears in front of the contractor, spinning a moral tale more chaotic than a thunderstorm. The contractor was so bewildered by my story that he thumped his chest and promised, "Don't worry, young lady, I assure you the work will be done in 3 days, and those troublesome family members of yours won't find you." Once I had reassured the contractor, I immediately called Lila, warning her to maintain secrecy while stockpiling supplies. The renovation was progressing rapidly. Unexpectedly, the next day, an unwelcome visitor appeared at my cottage. Josephine stood at the door of the old house, flanked by a bodyguard and holding a document bag. My heart tightened. What was she up to now? Surely she wasn't after the old house as well. My gaze sharpened, and I took a defensive stance, waiting for her to speak. Josephine looked critical, eyeing the worker who was reinforcing the door, and said disdainfully, "Ah, living deep in the wilderness suits you, just like Samuel said. A charmless old woman like you fits right in with a barn." She waved the document bag and continued, "Now that you're divorced, clinging to the company shares isn't right. You won't have to see each other anymore. Samuel has entrusted me to handle the transfer of his company shares fully." I glared at her. "You came here behind Samuel's back, didn't you? For a man as greedy as him, are you sure he'd just hand over his shares to you?" In my previous life, devastated by my ex-husband's deceit and betrayal, I had bought out his shares with all the cash I had, forcing him out of the company. Though it was satisfying, that very money helped him stockpile a vast amount of supplies at the onset of a zombie outbreak. He and Josephine thrived through every wave of zombies, while I sat starving and thirsty in my apartment, helplessly staring at the stock certificates. Unexpectedly, in this life, the mistress had her eyes on my shares early on. Perfect. I had been worrying about how to drain my ex-husband's cash, and here was an opportunity landing right in my lap, but I couldn't let them get the shares that easily. I just couldn't. Josephine, hand on her hip and protruding her belly, said, "After all the years you've been with Samuel, you couldn't even have a child. Now that I'm pregnant, shouldn't you offer a gift to my child? The shares you hold aren't much, just enough to give to my child." Unable to bear it any longer, I picked up the phone and called my ex-husband directly. "Did you send Josephine to force me to give up the company shares?" Before he could respond, I cried. "The company was founded with my parents' compensation money, and I built its business from scratch. When I was humbling myself to secure orders, you were sitting in the office. When I was running around in 40-degree heat to oversee the projects, you were sitting in the office. When I was vomiting blood from drinking too much at business dinners, you were still sitting in the office. You said you fell in love with Josephine, and as per your wishes, we divorced, and I gave you all the money. Now why should I also give the company shares to Josephine for nothing?" As I spoke, I remembered the betrayal of my ex-husband from my previous life, a thorn that had always been stuck in my heart. I loved him wholeheartedly, protected him, and couldn't bear to see him bow down to others or face their disdain. Sent a follow-up message, "By the way, I've just sold off all my shares, and the law firm will contact you soon." This calculated move was timed perfectly, as Josephine, already fuming and suspicious, wouldn't let an opportunity slip to check Samuel's messages. As expected, her rage was rekindled at the sight of the message. Meanwhile, I sat back and monitored the chaos unfolding through the hidden cameras, the remnants of my former life providing a twisted sense of entertainment. Josephine's reaction was explosive. She stormed out of the sitting area and resumed her rampage, breaking more valuables in the process. Every smash was a cathartic release for me, knowing that each item destroyed was one less relic from a past life that I was eager to leave behind. Samuel, desperate to salvage whatever he could, scurried behind her, cushion in hand, trying futilely to catch the fragments of his crumbling facade. On my screen, I watched with a mix of amazement and satisfaction. Josephine's destructive prowess was impressive, resembling the force of nature that no mere man could contain. After a good half hour of destruction, both exhausted, they collapsed onto a clear spot on the floor. Samuel began to speak, likely aiming to suit the situation. Seizing the moment, I sent another message, further stirring the pot, watching as the drama unfolded, ready for the final act of this grim theater. I sent another message to Josephine's phone. I followed your instructions and pretended to agree with Samuel. When will the 50 million you promised be transferred to my account? Attached was a share transfer agreement with Josephine's name conspicuously on it. Samuel's expression changed drastically, and a fierce confrontation ensued. Humming a tune, I turned off my phone, pulled out my apocalypse supply list, and checked for any missing items as I planned a bright future for Lila and myself. 3 days later, the house renovations were completed on schedule. The solar panels on the roof and the cameras on the walls were all set up. After settling the final payment for the construction, I looked around cautiously, making sure no one was around. I quickly slipped into the yard, switched on the electrical grid, and felt a surge of security as the gate closed. Under the sunlight, the glass shards on the high walls sparkled, and the high-voltage electric fence was a formidable deterrent. The high-definition infrared cameras covered the entire area, ensuring that every movement within a 100-meter radius outside the gate was clearly visible. Day and night, the doors and windows of the 3 main rooms were all replaced with explosion-proof ones. This was our second line of defense, and should we unfortunately be invaded, it was also our fallback plan to retreat to the bunker. The well in the yard was not only cleaned but also fitted with a cast iron cover to ensure both protection from damage and water cleanliness. Overjoyed, I couldn't wait to call my best friend Lila. Lila, the house is ready, and we can start moving supplies in. Unexpectedly, it was Samuel's voice on the other end. Moving in? Move what in? I was stunned. Had he kidnapped Lila? Could it be that he had also been reborn? In an instant, 800 possibilities flashed through my mind. I measured my words. What do you want? As soon as I finished speaking, the line went dead. I redialed, but only got a continuous busy tone with no answer. Panicking, I activated Lila's phone tracker, which showed her location at the farmer's market. Without a second thought, I grabbed a sickle and rushed to the farmer's market. Lila, nothing better happened to you. In my frantic rush, I could see from afar that the entrance to the farmer's market was packed with people. Within the densely crowded circle, Samuel stood blocking Lila, his face flushed, his voice loud and excited. Just come with me, we can negotiate a good price. At that moment, Samuel continued to eye Lila, his gaze filled with mockery and lust as his hand inevitably moved towards her face. Unable to contain my anger, I pushed through the crowd and lunged forward, my vision tinged with red as blood rushed to my head. Move, I shouted, swinging the sickle in my hand as I charged forward, ready to strike at Samuel's hand. Terrified, Samuel quickly retreated, pulling his arms back. Then, I turned around and delivered a swift roundhouse kick to Samuel's face. I'll beat you, you despicable scum, with a bird's face. You've been a pervert since you were born. Even at birth, you had to look back, not wanting to glance at my ex-husband again. I grabbed Lila's hand and we left. On the way, Lila told me that she had gone to the farmer's market to stock up when she ran into Samuel, who had gone to the nearby antique street looking for an antique restorer. Samuel had heard the news we had deliberately spread, knowing she was facing difficulties in securing a significant deal and was seeking help everywhere to sell her company and house to raise funds. This was exactly what we had discussed. We used the excuse of securing a major order to divert attention, hoping to quickly sell off the household assets to exchange for more survival supplies. Under the heavy temptation of money, Samuel couldn't hide his excitement when he met Lila today, eagerly approaching her and speaking animatedly. Essentially, he wanted to take advantage of the situation to buy her company and house at a low price and also wanted to make her his mistress. How could Lila tolerate such indignity? She immediately lost her temper. Lila, always dressed in a beautiful dress and high heels, naturally found herself at a disadvantage during the struggle. Even her mobile phone was snatched away by her ex-husband, leading to the scene I witnessed. Damn it, I cursed under my breath, glancing at Lila, whose face was still quite pale. I stepped forward, put my arm around her shoulder, and changed the subject. Miss you, don't let these dirty tricks spoil your mood. I continued earnestly, what's most important now is stocking up. Lila nodded. Indeed, there will be time to deal with him later. She quickly adjusted her mood and pulled me towards the hardware store. Come on, I've reserved some good stuff. Although I had anticipated it, I was still shocked by the scene before me. Inside the store, a series of shiny, sharp crossbows were lined up in front of me. The store owner's eyes gleamed as he sized me up. "Lila, is this the friend you said who has killed a tiger?" Without blushing or skipping a beat, Lila nodded. "Yes, we're planning to hunt a couple of deer in Africa. And we'll send you the antlers as a gift." Embarrassed, I wondered when I had become a modern-day female warrior equivalent. Lila gave me a look, and I understood instantly. When abroad, you craft your own identity. To play along, I pretended to scrutinize the crossbows, occasionally clicking my tongue critically. "This isn't great, boss," Lila chimed in. "You see, my friend knows her stuff. Don't hide the good things. Bring them out." The store owner glanced towards the POS machine, hinting at a price increase. I nodded in agreement. Only then did the owner bring out 2 tang swords from behind the counter, saying solemnly, "These have been sharpened." "Pleased," I nodded. We spent $1.5 million on the crossbows and tang swords, but I felt it was worth it. In a post-apocalyptic world, the least reliable thing is the human heart. This purchase further secured our survival for the days to come. Lila and I returned to the car to check our stockpile list. In a post-apocalyptic world, food is the most crucial. We started with 10,000 pounds each of rice, flour, grains, and oils, and 100 boxes each of every type of seasoning you could name from the kitchen, salt and sugar, both strategic commodities in such times. Essentials also included compressed biscuits, self-heating hot pots, various canned meats and fish, and canned fruits, of course, to store all this food. We specially bought 20 double-door refrigerators and a 500-liter freezer. In the early days of the apocalypse, these would be crucial for storing meat. Water was also indispensable. We ordered several 100-liter water tanks and bought 10,000 boxes of bottled mineral water. We also stocked up on plenty of beverages such as Coke, Sprite, orange juice, wheat drinks, and so on, to cater to different tastes. This time, we hoarded boxes of sweets and desserts that we usually avoid to maintain our figures, such as candy, chocolate, energy bars, tiramisu, and soft cheese. Despite it being the apocalypse, the ecosystem hasn't been destroyed. Sunlight and vegetation are normal. Hence, we plan to stock up on some solar-powered generators for emergencies. We got 10 sets each of diesel generators, solar panels, and wind turbines to keep ourselves occupied during the dull days of the apocalypse. With a grand gesture, Lila purchased 100 units of the latest model of gaming consoles and the most expensive version of the domestic top-tier game, Wukong. She also asked the clerk to download the most popular current variety shows and classic movies and TV series. In these chaotic times, if one falls ill, we're on our own. Thinking of this, Lila and I split up and scoured the city's hospitals and pharmacies, hoarding the maximum amount of alcohol, iodine, protective suits, cold medicines, fever reducers, allergy medicines, vitamins, and donkey hide gelatin cakes among other drugs. Feminine hygiene products were also essential. We bought large quantities of sanitary pads, toilet paper, and wet wipes. To prepare for extreme weather, we purchased many fans and thick cotton quilts. From past life experiences, we knew that zombies are attracted to noise. So air conditioning was out of the question due to the noise from the external units. We had to settle for air cooler fans instead. Winter wasn't as demanding. Heated floor mats, heaters, hot water bags, and electric blankets were all usable. At a critical moment, Lila reminded me that we could also buy some coal, not only for heating but also for cooking. Lila went to the neighboring market to buy lots of seeds and young chickens, ducks, and fish, while I bought numerous books on planting. Seeing Lila's bustling energy, I just shook my head. She's always been impulsive since childhood. I sighed silently, but after all, she is Lila, and I am willing to support her for a lifetime, just as she does for me. Despite her objections, I took her to the mall and hoarded 100 boxes of face cream. Even in the apocalypse, we strive to live with dignity. Just as we loaded the supplies onto the truck, a reminder from the shelter's external monitoring system alarmed us. I broke out in a cold sweat. Wondering if the contractor had become suspicious, I quickly checked my phone, and there on the screen was Josephine's face. In the video, she was banging on the iron gate with 2 bodyguards, cursing. "What kind of crappy door is this? So hard," as she complained. stepping on a bodyguard to peer through the gap in the door. Her face grew darker. Josephine, shaking her hand in pain from the knocking, yelled, "Natalie," opening the door so tightly in broad daylight, "don't think I don't know what you're up to. You're still clinging to a man after the divorce. How desperate are you, Samuel? Stop hiding. I know you're in there." Furious, I knew immediately what was going on. It must be Samuel up to no good again, pinning the blame on me. Josephine waited a moment without hearing a response, growing both anxious and angry, her eyes rolling in frustration as she muttered, "If you won't come out, that's fine, too. Don't blame me for being rude then." She ordered her bodyguard to drive the van straight towards my titanium alloy gate, pointing arrogantly and speaking in a domineering tone. Ram the gate open. I frowned, not out of concern for the gate itself. I had spent a good deal of money on a gate that wouldn't break from a mere van collision. It was her disrespect that irked me. How thick-skinned must Josephine be to constantly provoke me, flaunting her status as the other woman right in front of his legitimate partner? My expression darkened, and I held back my anger. Lila misunderstood my concern, thinking I was worried about the gate, and comforted me, "Don't worry. Let her try. If she breaks it, she'll have to pay for a new one." She reassured me, "You can always have a new gate custom-made and installed in time." Inspired by Lila's words, I realized, compensation, why hadn't I thought of that? In a corner of the old mansion's yard lay a pile of pottery and porcelain that had been dug up by a construction. From the looks of it, as soon as Josephine got the gate open, it was only a matter of time before she crushed the porcelain collection. When that happened, I was prepared to insist they were family heirlooms. With a slight smirk, I thought, "You've really picked the wrong person to mess with this time." I hurriedly started the truck and headed for the old family home in the countryside, afraid of missing out on the windfall that Josephine seemed to promise. At the same time, I didn't forget to send a message to Samuel, using the excuse of discussing share transfers to get him to come to the old house too. After all, it's best when the whole family is together. 10. As it turned out, I had underestimated Josephine's capability for destruction. By the time Lila and I arrived, the van was already a wreck, and the wall of my courtyard wasn't much better off, charred black with its red brick interior exposed, punctuated by a large hole just big enough for a person. To my slight relief, my aluminum gate was still intact. Sigh, I exhaled, realizing I couldn't avoid the hassle. I needed to replace the entire wall with aluminum as well. Using my phone to remotely open the gate, I was surprised to find the porcelain in the corner untouched, without a sign of being moved. Just as I was pondering this, I turned around only to come face to face with Josephine's frenzied expression. I jumped in shock. Her face was twisted in rage, her eyes gleaming menacingly, reminiscent of a man-eating spider demon from Journey to the West. "Where's Samuel? Have him come out," she demanded. Just as she finished speaking, Samuel's voice floated in from outside the courtyard. "Natalie, your darling husband is here. I've brought your favorite roses." He approached with a confident smile, holding 99 roses and striding towards me. As Samuel rounded the corner, he came face to face with a furious Josephine. Their eyes met, one in panic, the other in fury, creating quite the spectacle. I secretly rejoiced, having hinted in the text message that I was willing to concede some benefits to ensure Samuel would show up, but who knew that my message, suggesting I was giving up my shares, would be interpreted by Samuel as me still having feelings for him. Thus, he turned up, dressed to impress, bearing roses, and wearing cologne. Josephine's tension collapsed in that moment, and she looked utterly shattered. Lila and I exchanged glances. She got the hint instantly and jumped into action to stir things up. Lila, with small, quick steps, ran to Samuel's side, clinging to his arm and cooing in a saccharine voice, "Honey, didn't you say I was your only sweetheart?" The cringe was real. Not everyone can pull off such a foxy act. Samuel swiftly jumped back, trying to explain to Josephine, "Don't come any closer. I have nothing to do with her," unable to contain her rage. Josephine grabbed a manicured nail and charged, unarmed. How could this be? I seized the opportunity to move the porcelain with Lila to the corner, handing pieces to Josephine, who threw them at Samuel, who yelped in pain while being cautious not to hurt her as she was pregnant. He could only silently endure. Josephine, quite the character when enraged, took whatever I handed her, each piece hitting Samuel squarely in the face. Finally unable to bear it, Samuel knelt down and pleaded for mercy. Exhausted, Josephine found a clean rock to sit on, panting heavily. Samuel shamelessly crawled over to appease her. Josephine knew his true nature, gave him an eye roll, but didn't reject his overtures. Their attention finally shifted to me, and I had already pulled out the pre-prepared invoice and POS machine to hand over to Samuel. Following that, I flashed a standard smile showing 8 teeth. The total is 5 million. How would you like to pay? Both of them stood there, stunned. I kindly explained, sweethearts, the items you smashed are antiques. Samuel immediately tried to deny responsibility. It wasn't me who smashed them, go find whoever did it. Josephine exploded, pointing at Samuel and stuttering, you, for a while. But Samuel simply smirked. Don't think I don't know about your little stash. You hurt me, don't expect me to pay for it. Seeing his unfazed demeanor, Josephine was so angry she couldn't stand straight and clutched her stomach in pain. That's when Samuel panicked and quickly got up to comfort her. I stood to the side, smirking continuously. I had thought their love was strong, but now it seems their affection isn't that deep after all, as a mere 5 million was enough to drive them apart. But Josephine had indeed hit Samuel's soft spot. Before we were divorced, he had often tried to puncture the condom to get me pregnant by accident. But each time I discovered it and he never succeeded, now with a child at his older age. He treasures it dearly. I looked on with irony. In my past life, I actually died tragically because of these two people. The resentment in my heart solidified and lingered for a long time. While I was lost in thought, the two of them had conspired together and presented a united front. Naturally, I was the outsider, leveraging her shamelessness. Josephine struck first. She snorted coldly, looking down her nose at me. How can you prove that I was the one who smashed them? There's no surveillance here. My smile grew even brighter as I pointed to the top of the courtyard wall. But darling, there are 66 surveillance cameras in the yard. I gave her a sweet wink. As a charming single woman who is beautiful and somewhat wealthy, living in this remote place, how could I not have surveillance? Josephine choked, then suddenly made a move to grab my phone. Lila immediately cooperated by pulling out a series of smartphones from her pocket like a set of documents. No worries, go ahead and smash it. The cameras are connected to the network, and we can view them from any of our phones, I added. Right, even if all the phones are smashed, everything is still uploaded to the cloud. After saying that, I proactively handed my phone to Josephine, egging her on. Perfect, I've been bored with this phone for 2 years now. Go on, smash it, and help me get the latest model. Josephine stood there, frozen, not moving for a long time. I thought about it. Then went inside and fetched a hammer for her. Do you think you're too weak to smash it? No worries, I'll help you. Josephine resorted to her old tricks again, clutching her stomach and feigning faintness. Samuel, who had been enjoying the drama, finally reacted, jumping out to accuse me. Natalie, don't go too far, bullying a pregnant woman. Do you have no conscience? I reduced the smile on my face. Conscience. Whoever lacks conscience knows it themselves. Samuel's long-lost sense of shame. It's rare for me to make a guest appearance like this, he said bitterly. A good man doesn't argue with women. I won't stoop to that level. I rolled my eyes dramatically. If you can't win the argument, just admit it. Why make excuses? Without waiting for his reaction, I threw a stack of forged antique invoices at his face. I can't believe how badly you're doing since our divorce. You can't even come up with $5 million now. How can I trust you with the company's shares? Seeing that I was pressing him with the shares, Samuel's face turned green, and he was speechless for a long while. I wasn't in a hurry, knowing that only the greedy would take the bait. Finally, Samuel made up his mind. You know very well whether it's a real antique. If it was so valuable, would you casually leave it in the yard? I didn't confirm or deny. He changed the subject. However, for old time's sake, I'm willing to be the sucker here, just to make you happy. Ignoring Josephine's glaring eyes, I continued, all right, pay up first, and then we can discuss the shares. Grinding his teeth and under Josephine's menacing gaze, Samuel transferred $5 million to me. I smiled radiantly. Thanks for the $5 million. Both of their faces turned as dark as the bottom of a pot. Can we talk about the transfer now? You agreed to half price. You can't back out now. My eyes filled with sarcasm. Fine, $15 million. It's yours." Even though the price was essentially a 50% discount, I had checked Samuel's financial status with Lila in advance. The cash flow he and Josephine could scrape together was just about that. Sure enough, the two of them scrimped and scraped, and after much effort, managed to gather $14 million, still $1 million short. They came to me, pleading, prepared to default. Defaulting was not an option. My gaze focused on Samuel's luxury car and the designer clothes they wore. With a flick of my wrist, the car keys were in my hand. This should be worth quite a bit. This car could cover $800. 000. I assessed them, wondering what to do about the remaining $200. 000. Those coats, those shirts, and shorts you're wearing could fetch some money secondhand. Samuel crossed his arms over his chest. "I warn you, don't go too far." My smile widened. "Why the rush?" I handed back the car keys, suddenly changing my tone. "If you can't afford the shares, then get lost." Samuel's face turned livid. "I warn you, don't go too far. What goes around comes around. You never know when it'll be my turn. It's better to leave some room for later reconciliation." I sneered. "A chance for reconciliation? Not likely, not a single bit. When the zombies come, you two might as well meet with the king of hell," Lila opportunistically added. "I'd remind you, once this chance is gone, it's gone for good." Samuel's sense of shame wavered, his expression twisted and changed dramatically. Ultimately, desire overcame pride, and though his face was grim, his words contrasted sharply. "Just leave me my underwear." Leaving that was not an option. I casually plucked a leaf from a crooked-necked tree. "Here, take this." A single leaf was enough. Samuel's face alternated between red and white as he looked at the share transfer contract, hesitating for a long time before finally compromising. He and Josephine succumbed under my power, slowly removing their accessories, watches, necklaces, earrings, handbags. Anything that could be taken off was taken off. As a woman, I was relatively lenient towards Josephine, leaving her with a set of close-fitting red thermal underwear. As for Samuel, being a big man, I had no such concerns for him. I didn't even leave him a pair of socks, let alone his underwear. If it weren't for the fact I found it disgusting, I would have loved to pluck his hair out to keep as a souvenir. Samuel arrived dressed as a well-heeled executive in a Mercedes and a suit. Now, he was left with nothing but a single leaf to cover his modesty. Josephine was in a similar state, dressed in a bright red set of thermal underwear, her hair disheveled, and barefoot in the mud. I even took their hair ties. Watching the two of them shivering in the cold wind, supporting each other as they walked towards the city, I felt a rush of pleasure. I just collected a bit of interest in advance. When the zombie outbreak begins, there'll be plenty of laughter to be had. After seeing the two off, Lila and I took the 17.5 million we had scammed and quickly stocked up on supplies. A week later, the zombie outbreak occurred. Transportation was paralyzed, and social order quickly collapsed. Lila and I lay in our steel fortress, casually using our smartphones with our feet propped up, feeling completely safe. We planted the seeds we had stocked up on in the yard, set aside an area to raise chickens and ducks, and even dug a small fish pond. We established a secure little haven in this apocalyptic world. As soon as we settled in, Lila eagerly pulled me over to the computer. "Look, your ex-husband and his mistress are fighting." I became interested and saw the two of them grappling with each other on the screen. Josephine was the aggressor. "You useless man. How dare you trade me for instant noodles? I'm carrying your child. Do you have no conscience?" At first, Samuel didn't react, merely holding 2 bags of instant noodles, ignoring Josephine's tantrum. But when he heard the word child, Samuel exploded. He slapped Josephine down, shouting, "You wretch! How dare you mention the child? Is this child even mine?" While speaking, he pulled out his phone, displaying a paternity test result that read, "No paternal match. If I hadn't taken you to Hong Kong for a paternity test beforehand, I wouldn't have known I was being cuckolded." Samuel, eyes red with rage, began to punch Josephine repeatedly. "I divorced for you, and now it's time for you to repay me, trading you for some food. What's wrong with that? It's not like it costs you a limb, you wretch. I'll kill you." From their conversation, I pieced together their experiences during this time. Initially, Samuel relied on shamelessness, bluffing and deceiving in the community group, managing to scam quite a bit of food. But as more and more zombies appeared, the food he could obtain was limited, forcing him to threaten the residents in the community group. He coerced the people on his floor to give him what he demanded. Otherwise he would scream loudly to attract zombies into the building, declaring if he couldn't live, then no one else should either. Unfortunately, in this apocalyptic world, ruthless people were abundant, stripped of moral shackles. All that remained was naked human nature. The residents of Building 10 united and ambushed Samuel's family under the cover of night, giving Samuel a severe beating. He behaved for a few days, but hunger eventually defeated him. This time, Samuel resorted to bartering, and his commodity was Josephine. The two fought fiercely, and by the end, Josephine was lying on the ground, barely breathing. Lila was furious, shouting, "Beating a woman? What kind of man are you? If you're so capable, go compete with other men." I remained silent, internally cursing. They deserved it. I took Lila to the vegetable garden to check on our newly sprouted plants. I didn't tell Lila that in my previous life, I had it even worse than them, but all that is in the past now, never to happen again. Just a week into these joyful days, I received a video call from Samuel. He's still alive. That surprised me, but I picked up the call with interest. Samuel looked pale and seemed to have aged 10 years. "You bitch, did you know the apocalypse was coming? Not only did you willingly give up everything to take just an old country house, but you also tricked me out of my car and all my money, hoping I'd starve in this apocalypse. Did I underestimate you? Truly, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned." I raised an eyebrow. "Quite spirited of you. I thought you'd beg me to come and get you." He chuckled softly, looking down. "Why demean myself? You've spun your web carefully, just waiting for today, haven't you?" At that moment, I turned on the surveillance footage, and the scene that popped up on the screen gave me a huge shock. In the center of the house stood a large pot, and next to it lay Josephine, barely alive, her stomach torn open. Something was bubbling in the pot. I couldn't help but lean over the trash can and vomit violently. How could someone be so heartless? Seeing this, I didn't want to talk any further. I hung up the phone and picked up the radio by my bedside, expertly tuning the receiver. I expected the usual crackle of static, but unexpectedly, the radio started broadcasting a familiar voice, repeating a message. "A successful vaccine for the virus has been developed. It will soon be dispersed by airdrops. Please, do not lose hope amidst the disaster. The nation will always be your strongest support." Tears involuntarily welled up in my eyes as I looked up at the sky, where a ray of sunlight broke through the clouds.